saying the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all. As all members have received a copy of the minutes of our October 28 meeting, the reading of those minutes will be omitted. Are there any proposed changes to those minutes?
Wow. Okay, we just missed the first part of it. That's nothing. Okay.
Did you record on that?
I recorded it on that thing. Okay.
All right, we have a change.
Okay, we got another chip.
Any other proposed changes? The minutes as amended now stand adopted upon unanimous consent. John Eddy, Chair of our Appointments Committee.
Good evening, Mr. Moderator, members. Thank you. So my audience tonight, for what I'm about to say, are those of you who will be serving on the RTM next term. As most of you know, and perhaps some of you don't, the majority of the work on the RTM is accomplished through standing committees. And almost all of you have or will serve on a standing committee. And that's, they have their membership appointed by districts. But there are also three other opportunities for serving that you might find very rewarding. And those are the special committees of the RTM,
Let me know
the
when
Claims
you're on.
Committee and the Labor Contracts Committee. And
Yeah,
in
go ahead.
addition to that, there's a fourth item that I'll talk about as well. These committees are manned or staffed, or we appoint people based upon their skills and their experience. So we look for these from within the larger RTM committees. One of them is the Labor Contracts Committee, and it's like other standing committees in this primary function is to advise the
You got 2
RTM.
hours.
It examines labor contracts and all those that come before the RTM and for final approval, and it advises the RTM on whether or not it's a good idea to pass what our best course of action is when taking action on it. The committee has 7 voting members and 2 alternate members.
Give
And
me
examples of the
both.
skill sets that we'd be looking
I'll give you
for,
both.
although this is not,
Can I get the in between
this is
everything?
just an example. If something pops in your head and says, gee, I think there's something that I can bring to this, do not hesitate to put yourself forward.
Cameraman
Labor
down?
mediation, conflict
Yes.
resolution,
Yeah, I went to
people
a
who are
say,
experienced in human resources,
Chevron said.
labor negotiations, benefits administration, actuarial, contract law, high-level business leadership, and strategic and tactical guidance in labor markets and benefits. And let me be clear, the role of this committee, again, is to advise the RTM. It doesn't get involved in the actual negotiating of contracts or advising our negotiators on how to negotiate contracts. The other committee is the Claims Committee. It examines the disposition of claims against the town, and it is unlike any other committee on the RTM, is that it is invested with the power of the RTM to act on its behalf in approving appropriations, settlements recommended by the town attorney. So people bring lawsuits against the town. It's really the RTM's job to say whether or not we're going to approve those or what we're going to do with them. The RTM delegates that job to the Claims Committee. It does not report or make recommendations to the RTM. It acts on its behalf. And this committee has 10 members, 10 voting members, 2 alternate members. And typical skills we'd be looking for if you have these are litigation, risk management, negotiation, general legal experience, and insurance expertise. Finally, we're seeking someone to serve on the RTM as the RTM representative to the Harbor Management Commission. This representative serves a non-voting role, and they attend and participates in the committee meetings and reports to the RTM as needed on its activities and its challenges. For this position, someone who's got an interest in or experience on the Long Island Sound and who likes to communicate and report. Your interest could be in fishing, boating, commercial, recreation, or environmental. If this piques your interest, please put yourself forward. So The way to express your interest and to apply is by completing a candidate form and providing a resume. The appointments committee will then get in touch with you and interview you and nominate the people they feel would best serve the RTM. Right now, the information materials and the application forms can be found on the appointments committee page of the town website. And if there's anything I can do to answer your questions, I'm available. Tom Byrne is moderator of the RTM, is the chair of the claims committee. And Tom, you're willing to answer people's questions as well, right?
Yes.
Yep. And Josh Brown is the current chair of the labor contracts committee. He's available to answer your questions as well. So if you have any interest at all, we're casting a wide net. We really would like you to put yourself forward if you have an interest. Thank you.
Thank you. Karen Fosliotis, former RTM member of the BET.
Thank you. I just wanted to note that today is my mom's last meeting on the RTM in District 11. And I wanted to take the opportunity to thank her for her service as her daughter, but we also served as the only mother-daughter team on the RTM for a long time. And we didn't always agree on issues. In fact, we had many fights in the car going home. But I wanted to thank her for her 20 years of service to the RTM, just as a personal note.
Despina was also the chair of the 75th Anniversary Committee, and in that capacity became the RTM historian and preserved much of the RTM history. Thank you, Despina. Josh Brown, chair of our Labor Contracts Committee.
Mr. Moderator, fellow members, wanted to give a report as your Labor Contracts Committee reviewed an agreement that was reached between LIUNA 136 and the Board of Ed. We met on Monday, 25th of November with 5 members and the 2 alternates present. One member was participating by phone and therefore not voting. The 2 alternates were acting as members. Under the laws for this bargaining unit, this contract does not come to the RTM. It doesn't provide for the RTM to reject it, as occurs with all the other contracts that we have. The difference has created confusion in the past, and the RTM has requested our elected state officials to amend those labor laws so that this labor agreement follows the same review by the legislature, i.e. the RTM, as all other labor agreements do. There hasn't been a change. So we will be writing to State Senator Bernstein and State Representative Meskers and whoever replaces Mr. Camillo on this to, again, request to see how we can have the state law changed so that all labor contracts are coming before the RTM. In the past, the Board of Ed had referred these agreements to the RTM prior to their adoption. The Board of Ed chose not to for this round. Your Labor Contracts Committee believed that we had a commitment from the Board of Ed to discuss the agreement after it was approved by the union, but before the Board of Ed vote to approve. However, the Board of Ed approved the contract without coming to and sharing their thoughts and hearing our thoughts on the contract. Your Labor Contracts Committee requested a meeting with the Board of Ed to understand this agreement and evaluate it against the objectives. We had Mr. Bernstein, Board of Ed Chair, and Shemaine Johnson, the interim Board of Ed Chief HR Officer, helping us. Jennifer Dayton and Bob Stacy, who had led the negotiations, had moved on and were not available. This bargaining unit covers 176.5 professional assistants who provide assistance to students with disabilities and personnel to provide security in our schools. The last agreement was settled under arbitration. This agreement went through to mediation, which is a step right before arbitration. The professional assistants are mostly younger, some just out of school or wanting to get into teaching and see this as a way to get to know the district and also to get to be known by the district. Many see this as a stepping stone to becoming a certified teacher. Many end up leaving after the first few years, figuring out that this really wasn't the job for them, or they achieved their certification and became certified teachers, so they moved into another bargaining unit. So the turnover is very high in the first couple of years. Know that Greenwich for this bargaining unit is not the top, and it's actually down like number 6, 7, and 8, depending on the category, not the top salary earner for this job class. Key points that we talked about were the Board of Ed wanted to provide a competitive compensation to be able to attract and retain. Mr. Bernstein indicated that they believe that they're able to do so. They were also looking to control the wage and benefit costs, wage increases of less than 2%, not out of line with what the other agreements recently achieved. And also increasing the cost sharing of the health and benefits packages. They looked at a 4-year term, trying to get out of a 3-year cycle, and there are other contracts that they're going to be looking at, or the town's going to be looking at, trying to spread them out a little bit more so they all don't happen on the same year. And then some other language cleanup. The results are they got the 4 years, they got a gross wage increase of 2% for each of the steps. They were able to add, the current agreement has 6 steps, they were able to add 2 steps right at the beginning, and then also adjust the number of years in each step. It's a little bit unusual for this bargaining unit, and it has, you can have 3 years in a step. Many other bargaining units, every year you move up a step. In this, you're in a step for 2 or 3 years, and then you move up a step. So it kind of slows down the trend of increase in compensation, but it's been this way for a long time. This agreement shortened that to 2 to 3 and made them more consistent. There were some savings on the front end of the contract with the current level of services and employees. A little bit more costly on the back end, but overall, a net savings, all good. We also increased, the agreement increases stipends for education specialists and added an additional payment if a professional assistant was assisting more than one student. They get an additional stipend for each student that they were helping, which reduces the need for hiring new people or more people, and fairly compensates the individual for the additional work that they're doing. They were able to increase the cost sharing. Currently, the bargaining unit members pay 10% of the cost of medical benefits. Over the 4 years, it will raise to 13%. It's raising at a much slower trend, 1%, 1%, and then 0.5%, 0.5% for each of the years respectively, while we were getting 1.5% in some of the other agreements. So we were a little disappointed that while it's increasing, that's a good thing, just maybe not at the growth that we were hoping. And then there was a provision of a day off for no reason, just they could have a day off, and this agreement removed that option. And there are other agreements that have that as an option, so it was thought as a good thing. In summary, we very much appreciated the opportunity to discuss the agreement with the Board of Ed. Members of the Labor Contracts Committee were particularly unhappy with the tentative agreement not being discussed with us or presented to the RTM prior to their vote. We also had concerns about the cost benefits not increasing. The labor contracts supported me in making this report 600. Again, we had one member on the phone. So now we've reported on all the contracts. Thank you.
Thank you. Was there something else you wanted to?
Mr. Moderator, I rise for a point of personal privilege. I stand to recognize those in the RTM who will not be continuing in the next term. All too often, we stand to recognize accomplishments and contributions that former members have made only when they die. They deserve better than that, I think, and they should be recognized and see our appreciation. So with your indulgence, I ask the members who are not going to be serving in the next term, if you served 40 years or more, would you stand up, please? If you served... served more than 30 years, would you please stand up? More than 30 years? 20 years. Please stand up if you served more than 20 years and are no longer serving this term. If you served 10 years and no longer serving. And lastly, anybody else who's not serving, please stand up. Thank you.
Well, this being the last meeting of our term, it is bittersweet because we do say so long to so many diligent members. And in a moment, we are going to honor the longest serving of those retiring, but I just wanted to list and thank some of the leaders who have served long and hard. They include David Detchen for 20 years, and I may be off a little bit, but approximately 20 years. Doug Wells, I have around 24 years. Karen Ostomal, 30 years. Despina Fosley-Otis, 20 years. Alan Small, approximately 20 years. Rob Pirelli-Minetti, Sam Tellerico, and then the longest, of course, is Dean Goss. And what some people might not know is that, well, Dean, I count Dean's total years of service at 40 years. Dean had a rather large gap of almost 20 years because he received incorrect legal advice that he could not simultaneously serve as an RTM member and a member of a building committee. And as many of you know, Dean has served on many, many building committees. So Dean, my records show that you started in 1962. Is that your recollection? So he had a stint from 62 to 69, and then he had to step off according to the opinion he got, and he came back in 1988, 40 years. And tonight, I'd like to welcome, first of all, members of our Board of Selectmen to their first RTM member meeting in their capacity as selectmen. Jill Overlander, Lauren Raven, and of course our first selectman, Fred Camillo, who is going to read a proclamation in honor of Dean. Fred Camillo.
Mr. Moderator, members of the RTM, and guests, before I read the proclamation in honor of Dean Goss, I do want to also salute everybody who is retiring tonight. I served with many a long time ago. Now it's a lot of time, and certainly you do the people's work. So again, thank you all for the time you put in. Whereas Dean Goss joined the RTM in January of 1962, he will have served just over 39 years when he steps down from the RTM at the end of December 2019. Throughout his years of service, he served on the Health, Legislative and Rules, and Sewer Committees. He served on the first Building Committee after the Building and Sewer Departments consolidated with the Department of Public Works. And whereas Dean graduated from the University of Connecticut with a bachelor's degree in civil engineering, and from the University of Delaware with a master's degree in civil engineering, he was a professor at the University, the New York Institute of Technology from the 1970s to the 1990s, and was chairman of the Architecture Department for 15 years. And whereas Dean used his professional expertise and was instrumental in 10 building committee projects, serving on the building committees for Parkway, Glenville, North Street, North Miamis, Old Greenwich, Riverside, Coscob, Dundee, Eastern Middle, and Central Middle Schools. And whereas Dean and his wife, Ruth Yanisek of Greenwich, were married for 62 years, and they had 4 children, Wendy, Judy, Dean Jr., and Martha. Now, therefore, I, Fred Camillo, first selectman of the town of Greenwich, do hereby proclaim Monday, December 9th, 2019, as Dean Goss Day, and in the town of Greenwich, and urge all our citizens to join me in applauding Mr. Goss's service to the town and in wishing him many more years of health and happiness.
Yeah, I know. I know. Of course, when you make a list like this, you're going to forget people. And is Todd here tonight? No. All right, Todd Kennedy of District 11 first joined the RTM in 1972. So that gives him service of 48 years, I believe. So congratulations to Todd Kennedy. Thank you for your years of service as well. All right, I believe that now brings us to the call for tonight's meeting. I did notify our district and committee chairs that I would recommend that we combine items 3, 7, and 8 and consider all other items separately. So at this point, it would be in order to move to suspend the rules to combine items 3, 7, and 8 for voting purposes. It has been moved and seconded to suspend the rules and combine items 3, 7, and 8 for voting purposes. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion is carried. Item 3 now comes before us. Doug Wells, Chair of our Legislative and Rules Committee.
Mr. Moderator, ladies and gentlemen, item 3, resolved that it is the sense of this meeting that candidates for moderator and moderator pro tem of the 2020-2021 representative town meeting file their names with a brief statement of their qualifications with the town clerk on or before noon of September 27, 2019 for inclusion in the call of the January 2020 meeting.
Thank you. Will a member please move the adoption of the resolution? Resolution on item 3 has been moved and seconded. Discussion on item 3. Betsy Fruman, Chair of District 9.
District 9 voted by unanimous consent to propose the following amendment to item 3. Insert the following between the words representative town meeting and the word file are encouraged to. So it would then read, resolved that it is the sense of this meeting that candidates for moderator or moderator pro tem of the 2021 representative town meeting are encouraged to file their names with a brief, etc. Can I explain it?
Yep. That being offered on behalf of a district doesn't require a second, and that motion to amend is now before us.
Members of the district felt that since nominations from the floor are allowed, that nominees should be encouraged rather than mandated to provide a statement of qualification on the call. A nominee can have a lot of reasons why he did not get to putting his qualifications on the call. And in this day and age, there are many other ways to inform all of us of their qualifications. So the district felt that for everyone to have an equal footing, the resolution should read are encouraged to.
Further discussion on the District 9 motion to amend. Will the district chairs please mark your voting cards? District 9 motion to amend item 3 and proceed to poll your delegation. We will continue with the combined items after we get the result of that vote. We will come back. We won't take a vote on the combined items until we have the result of that vote. All right, item 7 now comes before us. Fred Camillo, our first selectman.
Resolved that Mike Pacino, nominated by the Board of Selectmen, be appointed as a regular member of the Board of Parks and Recreation for a term beginning upon appointment and expiring June 30th, 2022.
Thank you. Will the member please move the adoption of the resolution? Resolution on item 7 has been moved and seconded. John Eddy with the report of our Appointments Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. So your Appointments Committee spent about 30 minutes with Mr. Pacino the other night. And we learned that in addition to his service to the town on the state level, in his background, he has led the Byram Neighborhood Association. He's been PTA president of Lebanon School. He started one of the people who started apparently the Greenwich Preservation Trust. And he has established himself as in the town athletic community for decades, having grown up in town, participated in recreational programs as a youth, and in athletics as a student at Greenwich High School. He has coaching experience, 8-year-olds to Greenwich High School varsity, as well as a football coach for other towns in the region. His focus in his discussion and us was primarily on the town's youth. He shared with us his appreciation for how athletic programs both build character in kids and introduces a unifying element as programs bring together kids from different parts of town. He suggested that not only is this a value in and of itself, but it serves a role in helping kids transition from grammar school to middle schools. And entering a new school is much more comfortable if there's a friendly face and someone you know in the classroom.
This is on the amendment
He
that would
demonstrated to us he is
say
well-versed in the
as
history and the
opposed
needs of the
to
Dorothy
amend.
Hamill rink, and
Yes, to
sees the,
amend,
expressed that he
like it
sees
is
the need
now.
for us to build a new rink or rinks in order to serve the needs of the town.
Yeah.
We discussed the role of public-private partnerships in town and obtaining their, and with respect to that, he said he did not feel the town needed to make agreements with large corporations, but
And if you
things
could
like
get Tom,
signage in the outfield for one of the delis or one of the local car dealerships was the type of thing that he thought would bring in additional funds for us to make our programs work. He demonstrated familiarity with the athletic fields across the entire town and recognized that we need more athletic fields. And then when the familiar question of whether he favored artificial turf or natural turf came up, he demonstrated a deep knowledge of what options are available, and he reframed the question to ask what the specific needs are of the users on the specific fields to determine the type of natural turf or what type of engineered turf best meets the needs of the users they are serving. He cited that he did not believe that any town in the Northeast in this day and age should have a competitive baseball team without turf, which would allow them playing a longer season. So the Appointments Committee's recommendation to the RTM was 12-0-0 to appoint Rick Lucino.
Thank you. And yet another retiring RTM member who we did not mention, Andy Chapin. You are retiring, right? Chair of our Parks and Recreation.
Glad to see me go, huh? Okay. Not to repeat what Mr. Eddy said, we met with Mr. Bacino, who's very enthusiastic about the fields. He feels that many of the fields need work. We all know that. He thought a balance could be struck between engineered fields, engineered grass fields, and artificial turf, and would work towards that. The committee in general liked Mike and voted, hang on, I have it here, 9-0-2 in favor of him. The two abstentions were a reflection not of Mr. Bacino. They both said that they liked him, but it represents a growing concern that the members of this board tend to be solely focused or primarily focused on active ball fields. And the committee is concerned about that going forward because there are more people that use the beach, there are more people that use passive parks. There's a lot more to Greenwich than ball fields. And it's important that this committee represent and pay the proper amount of attention to these areas of the park. So the two abstentions, again, were not against Mr. Bacino, but more speaking towards the appointments we would like to see on the committee in the future. That being said, 9-0-2.
Thank you. Discussion on item 7. Item 8 now comes before us. Fred Camillo.
Resolved that John Vecchiola, nominated by the Board of Selectmen, be reappointed a regular member of the Planning and Zoning Board of Appeals for a term beginning upon appointment and expiring October 31st, 2023.
Thank you. Will the member please move the adoption of the resolution? Resolution on item 8 has been moved and seconded. John Eddy with the Appointments Committee report.
So, Mr. Vecchiola is being re-nominated after having served on the Planning and Zoning Board of Appeals since 2016. This is the fourth time he has come before the Appointments Committee in 3 years. And in the process of reaching out to him to set up an interview, I expressed to him, I was kind of scheming. I wanted to ask our committee members if they'd be willing to have a discussion about approving him without having him come in yet another time. And he said he preferred to meet with the RTM because he felt that the dialogue was important and the process was enjoyable to him, and I think he deserves recognition for that. Consistent with what we've been talking about with respect to people who've been serving the town for a long time. In addition to being a town attorney for 49 years, Mr. Vecchiola served on the Board of Education for 14 years. He was chairman of the high school building committee for the Science and Technology Edition. He was active in many nonprofits. He advised us that he had spent a lot of time in front of the PZBA in his own career, because when he got started, he got an extra $50 if he attended the PZBA meetings, and was able to do appeal for the organization he worked with. He described that the applicants who come before the board are always treated courteously. He gave us an informative overview of the board and reviewed the definition of hardship for us. And he is the only member of the Planning and Zoning Board of Appeals who comes from the west end of town. It was a pleasure, I think, for the Appointments Committee to meet with him. Our vote was 12-0-0 in favor of appointing him.
Thank you. Peter Burr, Chair of our Land Use Committee.
Good evening, everybody, Mr. Moderator. As Mr. Eddy just mentioned, we've seen John Vecchiola many times, I think 3 times just in the last year because of the change in rotation schedule. He is an attorney by training. He's got 47 years of experience as a land use attorney here in the town of Greenwich. We always ask for one's definition of hardship, because, in order to get a zoning variance, you have to demonstrate hardship. And Mr. Vecchiola emphasized that it can't be for economic reasons. You can't ask for a hardship to expand your house because you can't afford a bigger one. Because the town has been largely developed and there's relatively little open space, he said many of the applications currently coming before the Zoning Board of Appeals are increasingly challenging to resolve. And we talked about 2 recent cases where there were lot splits on very steep slopes. He also, in response to a question, Mr. Vecchiola said that the board is more likely to decline a variance if neighbors show up and oppose it. Sometimes neighbors don't know to show up or don't think to show up, but if there's a variance in your neighborhood, bring it to the attention of your constituents and urge them to show up and express their opinions. Our vote on Mr. Vecchiola was 11-0-1 district. I'm sorry, it was 12-0-0. Thank you.
Thank you. Discussion on item 8. All right, I have the result of the vote on the District 9 motion to amend item 3. Those in favor, 118, opposed 61, abstaining 2. That motion to amend has carried. We are now voting on the combined items, which is item 3 as amended, and items 7 and 8. Will the district chairs please mark your voting cards, combined items 3, 7, and 8, and proceed to poll your delegation. The first of these separate items now comes before us, item number 1. This is postponed from our September meeting. All right, this is a resolution amending the appendix to the RTM rules as it relates to the town's services committee. So what is in the call is now before us. May we have the committees, the reports of the committees that considered this. Josh Brown, Labor Contracts Committee
Mr.
report.
Moderator, fellow members, and guests, the Labor Contracts Committee met on the 25th of November. As reported, 6 members participating. As the RTM had essentially spoken on this matter in the October meeting, and Town Services indicated that, and I'll be nice, they were not so interested in interviewing. The motion to postpone indefinitely was made, and our vote was 5 in favor, 1 opposed, 0 abstaining. The no vote on that thought it was a good idea to have other perspectives on nominations, so at the right time, I'll put that motion forward.
All right, so I'm not sure if the committees were aware, but the Town Services Committee has a motion to amend this. Is that correct? So, Mr. Newman, why don't you give your report next?
So we thank Labor Contracts for thinking of us. So what came back to us this month was a rewritten version that did not include 2 of the things that we do, and it did include labor contracts, which again we had asked to not have included. So we decided instead of referring it, we were going to take the bull by the horns and write it ourselves. Mr. Byrne, Moderator Byrne, has a copy of it. Effectively, we will be adding operational responsibility will include reviews operations of departments concerned with public safety. That already is in the appendix. Reviews operations of purchasing and administrative department, which is a new name. Reviews communication.
So why don't you just give them the changes?
Okay.
So you're adding administrative.
Adding administrative.
Yeah, I didn't see
And
this.
then we are adding interviews and evaluates all candidates for Alarms Appeals Board and Board of Ethics, which is something we've been doing for a long time, but it's not in the appendix. And the last is reviews any organizational changes or reporting relationships in town government, which is something the GovCon committee did recommend, and that's good.
All right, so essentially you are requesting the RTM to adopt this amended.
Yes.
So, you know, we'd have to take up a motion to amend, and then we'd have to vote on the merits of that.
Exactly.
All right, thank you. Anything further that you wanted to add?
Town Service voted to amend and replace existing with updated and corrected. Our vote was 9-0-0 with districts 3, 4, and 10 absent. Thank you.
All right. Rob Perlman-Eddie with the report of the Finance Committee.
Your Finance Committee took this up last Monday night. We had considered this back in September. We also understood that the Town Services Committee didn't want the addition of the Labor Contracts Committee, so we had voted 11-0-0 to postpone the item indefinitely, but assuming that the amended motion from the Town Services Committee is approved, we will not be making that motion.
Thank you. John Eddy with the Appointments Committee report.
Thank you. So the Appointments Committee took this up as it was stated in the call. And our discussion pretty much dovetailed with the RTM's discussion over the past few months about the importance of getting an appropriate number of eyes on the people that we appoint. We did understand that the Town Services Committee's preference was that they not receive this responsibility. However, the consensus of the Appointments Committee was that this is something that is necessary for the responsible and long-term functioning of the RTM, and our vote was 9-0-1 with District 10 abstaining.
Thank you. Doug Wells, Chair of our Legislative and Rules Committee.
This part was part of the Governance Committee's efforts to reassign some of the tasks of the Appointments Committee to various other committees. As you know, that effort was postponed indefinitely, so we took no action on this because we assumed that it was really part and parcel of that earlier effort.
All right. Mr. Newman?
So Town Services would like to bring this amendment, adding administrative department, adding interviews, evaluates all candidates for Alarms Appeals Board and Board of Ethics, and review any organizational changes or reporting relationships in town government. And we are eliminating the line assigning us labor contracts member review.
All right, that is a motion offered on behalf of one of our committees and does not require a second. This is a motion to amend. Is there any request to read it again? Okay, I heard a yes. So the amendment will take out the reference to the Labor Contracts Committee that is in the call. it will add in the second line that they will review not only the purchasing department, but the administrative department. That's what it says.
That's the new name, so purchasing and administrative combined.
Okay, so that's one department. That's
Right,
the
so it's not one
purchasing and
department.
administrative department, all right? So that is an addition. Another addition is interviews and evaluates all candidates for alarms, appeals board, and board of ethics.
Which is something we do now and have forever, but it was not in the appendix.
And adds this language, reviews any organizational changes or reporting relationships in town government. So that is their proposal to amend item 1. Discussion on that motion to amend. We can adopt amendments upon unanimous consent. Is there any objection to that proposed amendment? Hearing none, that motion to amend is adopted upon unanimous consent. All right, discussion on the amended item number 1. Will the district chairs, did anyone now want to? Okay, so the motion's postponed indefinitely did not realize this was coming forward. So they will not be offered. All right, we're now prepared to vote on the merits of the amended resolution for item number 1. Will the district chairs please mark your voting cards? Amended item number 1 and proceed to poll your delegation. While we are voting on number 1, item number 2 now comes before us. Mr. Wells, although it says it was postponed, I believe you said this went to the Legislative and Rules Committee?
Yes.
So would you like to present it? I take it your committee did bring this before us this month?
Yeah, we did.
Or saw to it that it got put on the call?
The governance committee did as well. I think both, and they chose to publish the one from the governance committee, but we also sent it.
But it had been referred to you in September. All right.
That's right. Resolve that section 3I6 be added to the rules of the representative town meeting to read as follows. It is as it appears in the call.
Thank you. And that coming from one of our committees does not require a second. May we have the reports of the committees, Mr. Wells?
As we just indicated, this was a governance initiative that was referred to the Legislative and Rules Committee. At our October meeting, I was asked to put this item back on the call, which we did. We noted one scrivener's error in the document at the bottom of page 1 of the call, subparagraph A. It says that the proposed resolution upon presentation to the town clerk will be placed on the call, small c, to conform to all the other references to the call. We capitalized it. That was a unanimous vote. And then we took up a vote on this as in legal order. The vote there was 10-0-0. The vote on the merits of this was 9-1. Districts 1 and 10 were absent. District 3 was against the item, remarking that there was a downside that a second reading could complicate the process of doing business and may discourage people who submit items by petition, in that it would take more than one meeting to have the matter considered by the Arts County.
All right, so you are offering a motion to amend that one scrivener's error. Is there any objection to capitalizing C in call? Hearing none, that motion to amend is adopted upon unanimous consent. Discussion on item 2. Is there any discussion on item 2? Will the district chairs please mark your voting cards, item number 2, and proceed to poll your delegation. We have the results of the vote on the combined items. Those were items 3 as amended, 7 and 8. Those in favor, 166. Opposed, 6. Abstaining, 10. The combined items have carried. All right. We now have 2 votes underway on 1 and 2. Item number 4 now comes before us. Katie DeLuca, are you presenting that? Eddie DeLuca, the town planner.
Good evening, Mr. Moderator, members of the RTM. I'm submitting a substitute resolution, which was handed to the moderator earlier. It reads, resolved that the 2009 Plan of Development, referred to as the 2009 Plan of Conservation and Development, approved by the representative town meeting on June 8th, 2009, is hereby repealed. And be it further resolved that the 2019 Plan of Development, referred to as the 2019 Plan of Conservation and Development, is hereby adopted as submitted, and that the following plans remain in force as approved. Number 1, planned housing design, designation on the Post Road from the Mianus River east of the Stamford border, and from Edgewood Drive west of the New York border, an amendment to the 1964 land use map and plan. Number 2, the 2002 open space plan, dated May 2002 and adopted by the RTM in September 2002. Number 3, the Grass Island Master Plan, adopted by the RTM in 1990. And number 4, the sewer boundary map of 2000 shows the areas to be sewered, adopted by the RTM in September 18th, 2000.
All right. Has this substitute resolution been circulated to everybody? So, I mean, as I read it, Ms. Blankley, there's no real substantive changes here. It does clearly say that the RTM would be hereby adopting as submitted.
That's the substantive change, and it now includes the words to adopt.
All right, thanks. Will a member please move the adoption of the substitute resolution? Substitute resolution on item 4 has been moved and seconded. May we have the reports of the committees that consider this, beginning with Mr. Berg and the Land Use Committee.
Again. So the Land Use Committee took up the POCD last Monday night. We had Margarita Albin open the discussion. She's the chair of the Planning and Zoning Commission. And she noted that although this has been a 2-year process, that the commission is willing to go along with whatever the RTM desires regarding further inputs. However, a decennial POCD every 10 years is required by state law, so an approved plan is required in due time. A major difference of the 2019 POCD compared to the preceding plan is that the plan is to be updated every 2 years. This would be particularly important in light of the results of the 2020 census that's coming up. The 2019 plan would also differ from previous POCDs in that there would be in-depth study committees composed of subject matter advisors. When asked to describe the relationship between the POCD and zoning regulations, Ms. Albin noted that it could be seen as an iterative, ongoing process, something of a circle, with POCD recommendations influencing zoning and vice versa. When asked by Peter Berg, chair of the Land Use Committee, to identify some of the highest priorities emerging from the 177 action items outlined in the plan, Ms. Albin noted that one of the top priorities was a town-wide greenscape plan. Ideally, this would create a beautiful, welcoming Greenwich, beginning with areas such as the Post Road corridor. Other action items in this regard were upgrading signage and lighting regulations. Further priorities would involve simplifying zoning regulations and protecting residential neighborhoods from commercial incursion. The 2019 plan had somewhat different priorities from the 2009 plan, whereas the previous plan had encouraged schools to acquire land. This is no longer a priority. Rather, there is more of an interest in the 2019 plan in preserving open space. Continuing to work on providing affordable housing is another top priority. Towards this end, Ms. Albin noted that it's important to create affordable housing that will fit in with existing neighborhoods. Attracting young families is another extremely important goal. Finally, she noted that creating residential village districts is envisioned, although this process cannot begin until the plan is adopted. The discussion next focused on the fact that the budget Overview Committee planned to put forth a motion to postpone the vote on this POCD. Tom Byrne was asked to comment on this and noted that with a vote to postpone, the plan will come back to the RTM exactly as it is. If there is a vote to refer to committee, there would be an ability for one or more designated committees to add or revise. The part about the, I'm sorry, I just have to look ahead here. There was some discussion about vague language in a POCD. And the gist of the conversation is that with the 2009 POCD, some RTM members voted for it, thinking that the FAR requirements were going to be relaxed, and they were upset when in fact the Commission subsequently tightened FAR regulations. So I guess it's a comment about vague language. Rob Pirelli-Minetti, Chair of the Finance Committee, noted that, by the way, this was a joint committee of 5 committees. I should have mentioned that. So we had the Finance Committee with us, and the chairman noted that the POCD could probably require a month or so of serious study given the financial implications of many of the proposed action steps. Ms. Alvin noted that the P&Z wanted to stay in its lane, avoiding any mention of financial issues or even the mill rate or property values and the cost of specific projects. The POCD was conceived as an aspirational document and did not make specific recommendations regarding financing of projects. There was additional discussion regarding data. Peter Berg emphasized that there's a need for the inclusion of relevant demographic data, particularly in light of the changing population dynamics of the downtown area, as well as school enrollment. Following the adjournment, each of the committees went their separate ways. The Land Use Committee took a voice vote to refer this POCD back to the Land Use Committee and any other interested committees for further discussion or additions. That motion failed. One Land Use Committee member read a letter from a constituent who emphasized strongly that the RTM should go ahead with a vote on this POCD tonight. That after nearly 2 years of numerous townwide open meetings and ample opportunities for residents to comment on the plan, the process has to come to an end. After further discussion, the Land Use Committee decided to take a vote and voted 11-0-1 in support of the item as it appears on the call. District 1 abstained.
Thank you. Before I call for the next report, I do have the result of the vote on item number 1 as amended. This is the description of responsibilities for town services. Those in favor, 168, opposed 13, abstaining 1. Item 1 is carried. I also want to point out that there are speaker lists on this item at the entrance, and if there's still sheets out there, if anyone wants to sign up. All right, Arlene Lamazzo with the Public Works Committee report.
Thank you, Peter. That was wonderful, and I won't repeat anything you said other than this. Margarita Altman was very, very emphatic when she said, and I'm going to quote, "This is your plan," meaning the RTM's plan, "and the commission will do whatever the RTM at this late stage wants." That was something she stressed, and that's why I'm repeating it to you. We had a lengthy discussion focused on the need to wait longer before taking action. Some members felt that there should be some demographics in an appendix now and would remain there until 2021 when the revisions would be made when the new census data comes out. There was a question as to whether some of the assumptions were not justified. For example, that aging residents prefer to live in place. They questioned, without hard data to support that, it shouldn't be taken as fact. That was just one comment. of timing was discussed. We understood that the commission needs the plan to be finalized as soon as possible so that they could apply for grants, and without an approved plan, they would be ineligible. She said, Mrs. Albert said, we have had extensions, quote, but we would not be able to do so anymore. A motion was made and seconded that this item be postponed to March. The vote was 7 in favor, 2 opposed, no abstentions. Districts 1, 2, and 9 were absent. The delegate from District 8 who voted no felt that it should be in January. The longer we wait, she felt, the more likely it will be that members will procrastinate rather than study it further. The delegate from District 10 who voted no felt that if we are going to wait, there should be a plan. Thank you.
Thank you. And again, before we proceed, I have the result of the vote on item number 2. That was the second reading proposal. Those in favor, 165. Opposed, 16. Abstaining, 0. Item 2 is carried. Lucia Jansen with the report of our Budget Overview Committee.
Good evening. I want to begin by thanking the P&Z Director and the Commission for the amazing 2-year effort involved to get community input. As it's been described, there have been focus groups, public hearings, a lot of time and effort to hear from us, the residents. We agree with the P&Z Director who described the POCD as second in importance to the town charter. The POCD is so important because it describes the essence of the quality of our life here in Greenwich. It describes our water, our houses, our schools. In essence, everything that compels us to move here. Unfortunately, when we took this up as a committee, there were different versions of the POCD. So we were not all working with the same specific information. Some BOC members didn't have the document at all. However, we were very pleased the director said she wants the RTM to love the document and is willing and eager to hear more inputs and edits. The RTM, as we know, we just voted on item number 2, where ordinances would have a second reading. I hope you agree that with this document, far more serious and impactful is the POCD, and we don't have a second reading as it stands now. Some have the impression that grants are at risk. Grants are not at risk if we delay a couple months the vote. I have been on the RTM long enough to know that in 2009, when we voted on that POCD, we were 6 months past the expiration date of that November 1998 POCD. The BOC made a motion to postpone the vote until the January RTM meeting. The vote was unanimous, 11-0-0, with District 2 absent. Thank you.
Thank you. Richard Newman with the Town Services Committee report.
Town Services took up this item last Tuesday, not at the joint meeting. We had Margarita Alvin, the chair of P&Z, Nick Macri, the secretary of P&Z, and Peter Berg, our chairman of land use, making the presentation to us. After listening to the presentation, we asked many questions. The highlights that I wrote down, that these are guiding principles, not set in stone, as it is being updated every 2 years after a long 18 months of initial work. We weren't sure that a committee of the RTM, if it was to review it, could really do justice in 1 month after they worked on it for 18 months. And we also, any RTM committee will take a long time to review while our existing POCD has expired. As it's been mentioned, there's a concern of the delay because it can affect us getting state grants. We have been able to apply for state grants with a waiver, but it's an extra process. We did recommend passing as is. We voted 9-0-0 with District 3, 4, and 10.
Thank you. Rob Corelli-Minetti with the Finance Committee report.
Yeah, the Finance Committee took this up as part of the joint meeting, and then we had the discussion. We had some concerns that we weren't ready to approve it without more time to review. We thought that it was very extensive. We appreciated the tremendous amount of work that both the Planning and Zoning Director and the Planning Director had put into it. But we felt that we weren't ready to approve it at this point. There was some discussion within the committee that we should postpone it to March, but we didn't reach a consensus on that. But we thought it was much too important to do now, so our committee voted 11-0-0 with District 6 absent to postpone to January. Thank you.
Thank you. Andy Chapin with the Parks and Recreation Committee report.
Parks and Rec also took this up last Tuesday. We also want to recognize the tremendous amount of work and the tremendous effort to reach out for public input that went into this plan. The key takeaways for us is that the plan is aspirational in nature. We're not committing to anything. Nothing in here is in stone. That the character of the town is a key point going forward, and that green spaces would be prioritized to make Greenwich an attractive place to be. Another key takeaway was that unlike prior plans, this POCD would be updated every 2 years. It wouldn't be something that goes into a drawer and then we pull it out 8 years later and say, oh, someone said this 8 years ago, we got to do it. There was some talk about specific items in there and whether or not the town was committed. So one that's going to be a flashpoint whenever it happens is the Northwest Firehouse. And if it's in the plan, are we agreeing to it now? And the answer is no. But it's in there, and we're going to talk about it at the appropriate time. Timeliness is an issue. I don't think we're in danger of losing any grants now. We're being granted extensions for those. But the state does require a plan be on file in order to put grants forward to the town. So at some point, January probably isn't an issue, March may not be an issue, but at some point timeliness will become a factor where there are lots of grants going to many different parts of the town that are dependent upon having a POCD, a current POCD in place. So we don't want to discourage anyone from taking a look, but keep that as a factor, that we're looking at it every 2 years, that it's aspirational in nature, and based on those concepts and making sure we're not committed to anything in stone in there, we thought that, the good of this document outweighed the chasing down of perfection. And we voted in favor of this plan, 11-0-0.
Thank you. Alexis Volgaris, Chair of our Health and Human Services Committee.
Good evening. Health and Human Services took this up last Tuesday. We had the pleasure of having Ms. DeLuca and Mr. Yeski present. I don't think there's anything that our committee could add that you haven't already heard, so our vote was 11-0-0 with District 10 absent. Thank you.
Thank you. Kimberly Blank, Chair of the Education Committee.
Your Education Committee met on a not that snowy Monday, December 2nd. 9 districts were represented with Districts 1, 2, and 3 absent. We met jointly with the other Monday standing committees to your presentations on item 4 and then met separately for discussion and voting. At our Monday meeting, the group chose not to engage significantly on the substance of the POCD. Many felt that it was a long document that they needed additional time to study. Instead of voting on the merits of the POCD, we voted on a motion to refer this item back to all standing committees with the intent to bring it back for a vote at our March meeting. Many thought the March timing was appropriate as we will have many new members and January might be too soon to expect significant input from them. Our hope was that in referring this item, committees could come up with specific suggested changes that could be expressed in the form of SOMERs before voting on the POCD. We appreciated Margarita Albin's sincere expression of interest in accepting input from the RTM. There was also some concern raised that not having a new POCD could jeopardize the town's ability to receive state grants that evening. But our motion to refer passed 8-0-1. District 10 abstained, saying she felt we could do more to try to push this further along for a vote in January. After a few of our members attended their district meetings, they emailed the group indicating that they had changed their view and would likely vote to approve the POCD tonight. Thank you.
John Eddy with the Appointments Committee report.
Thank you. I don't think I have much or anything to add that hasn't been said already, except the Appointments Committee recognized the sweat and incredible amount of work that the Planning and Zoning Commission put into this with an ovation at the end of our meeting, and we voted 10-0-0 with District 1 absent.
Doug Wells with the Legislative and Rules Committee report.
Legislative and Rules was part of the joint meeting last Monday evening. When we went back to our individual room to discuss this, we chose not to take a vote on the merits, but merely look at the resolution as to legal order. And we noted that the resolution didn't call for its adoption or approval. And so we made a motion to amend. However, since then, the substitute resolution has resolved that issue, that it now reads that it should be adopted by the RTM, so therefore we need not go forward on this motion. Our vote as to legal order as amended was 10-0-0.
Thank you. Any further committee reports? Mr. Newman?
I apologize, I read the wrong vote. Our vote on the POCD was 6 in favor, 1 against, 2 abstaining, with 3, 4, and 10 absently. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. We have heard several of our committees will be proposing motions to postpone. There were some to January, some to March. Typically, we would take those up rather than discuss, but the point, essentially, this postponement is similar to the idea that we just adopted in item 2 for a second reading. And what we just adopted encourages discussion on the item that is not going to be taken up first time, so that we get the benefit of 2 full meetings. What is that? Is it safe? I love that movie.
Yeah. Chief says keep going.
So we have a list of speakers, and I would propose, unless the speakers want to waive, that we would give them the opportunity, and I'm assuming this will be postponed to one of the other meetings, and then our committees will again review this and have the benefit of the discussion tonight. So shall we proceed in that fashion? Lucy Krasner, District 5.
Postponement possibility, even though you're talking about the merits right now, because we will have many new members, and to have something postponed in this manner to a lot of new members, I don't know what percentage this time of the RTM will be new.
There are approximately some low 50s new members.
50 new members, and 230 is a lot of new members. So I'm not sure how they can digest this. So I think hearing our speakers tonight is important, and it should be voted tonight, because to give this to new members is not a good idea.
Well, okay, all right, so, excuse me, I'm gonna call, we now have discussion, the motion to postpone is not before us. So, Ms. Krasner, I'm sorry, I thought you wanted something else. When we get to the motion to postpone, we can have that debate. So I'm going to go down in the spirit of our second reading, and we'll have discussion on this. In the event it's postponed, we will have heard what speakers said. If it's not postponed, we will have heard and we can vote tonight. So Ronald Strackbean, for what purpose do you rise, Mr. Detchen?
What was the basis for your assumption that it would be postponed tonight? Since most of the folks, committees that voted substantively on the matter.
All right, so I've recognized a speaker. I'm not recognizing you, Mr. Detchen. Ronald Strackbean, to be followed by Peter Berg.
My name is Ron Strikeline, and I've had the good fortune of being a resident of Greenwich for a period of 46 years. I'm a homeowner in Greenwich, but I am not engaged in real estate construction, real estate development, or real estate brokerage in Greenwich. Therefore, I may be less knowledgeable than the other members present, but I also do not have any conflicts with respect to the POCD process. I've had the opportunity to read the November 15th document, which I think is one of the more recent ones, Katie. And I am concerned about the nature of the process, number one. And number two, I'm concerned about the approval of the report in its entirety. Before reading the draft, I had attended 2 public meetings devoted to the POCD, which were conducted at the Greenwich Library and were also at Greenwich High School. And at the first meeting, the POCD was addressed as a consumer-focused preference group. Generic proposals were made, and people were asked to vote upon those instantly. Do you like this? Do you like that? Do you like this? Do you like that? And there was no substantive data, information, or analysis provided. People were just basically asked to express their preferences. I'm not certain that is really in the interest of the town in trying to get to a substantive document which is going to have a material impact potentially on the town in the next 10 years. The meeting which was held at the Greenwich High School was one in which a compendium of the survey process, and that's what I think the first meeting was, which is a survey. The survey process was provided to everyone present, but again, without any substantive analysis, substantive data, or substantive commentary. It was just a summary of the survey. Furthermore, no data was provided to the attendees concerning the impact, cost, financing, or prioritization of all the various items that were contained in the document. Now, I would like to make it very clear that I have tremendous respect for the work that's been done by Katie and her group, and also the Planning and Zoning Commission. To produce a 143-page document is a tremendous undertaking, and I have a full appreciation for that. But notwithstanding that, I do have these comments. I was a guest at the District 11 meeting last week, and the document was described as simply a vision of the future development of the town, but has no mandatory effect upon the town, or no binding effect upon the town. I've heard that recited again earlier tonight. However, I feel that at a minimum, the non-mandatory and non-binding effect should be put in page 1 of the document. I think it's very important that people understand that at the outset. One of the concerns I've always had is if you have a document written and you don't explain what the document is, the operative effect is, it can be utilized for many purposes which were not intended. I would also suggest that the RTM review the vision, quote unquote, and its impact very carefully. Furthermore, the RTM should have the capability to limit its approval of each part of the document and delete portions which do not enjoy the full approval of the RTM. I think the document has 143 pages of items, some of which undoubtedly everybody would approve. Others may have a different viewpoint, and I think that should be analyzed. As one example of the vision, the draft states on page 13 that an affordable and diverse housing stock is necessary. We can take advantage of the more urban growth models implemented in Port Chester, New York, and Stamford, Connecticut, our neighboring towns, which are substantially increasing their housing stock. To me, that is a very, very critical statement in this document. And I'm not sure that everyone in the RTM or everyone living in the town of Greenwich supports the view that we should have a growth urban development viewpoint with respect to the development of Greenwich. That, to me, is the most important question. Since the investment of many Greenwich homeowners in their home or condominiums represents their largest single investment, the implications of this focus upon urban growth models, I think, should be very clearly understood, explained, and analyzed for the RTM before they vote upon it. Numerous questions might be considered. For example, does the vision mean that the large-scale, multi-story apartment blocks readily visible throughout Stamford will be replicated in Greenwich without limitation? Does the tax revenue associated with such developments offset the town's fully burdened operating costs and capital costs with respect to serving the residents in those particular projects. What is the cost-benefit analysis of the various things? I mean, there's just 143 pages of material here, and has there really been a cost-benefit analysis taken for the benefit of the town? I didn't see any evidence in reading of the draft. Finally, what options should be considered in formulating the economic strategy going forward, which will sustain the premium real estate values that our community enjoys and underpin our tax revenue, which pays for the quality town services that we all enjoy. Thank you very much for your attention this matter.
Thank you. All right. Sorry, Mr. Berg. Sorry. We have a new board. Thank you. Sorry, you're not the next speaker. I neglected to call on Katie DeLuca. Katie DeLuca, Town Planner, to be followed by Bob Tuthill.
Thank you. Mr. Potter, am I allowed to speak to the plan as a whole, or am I just speaking to the procedure part? So am I allowed my 10 minutes, or am I just...
Item 4 is before us.
Excuse me?
Item 4 is before us. You may...
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. So, Mr. Moderator and members of the town meeting and guests, I would like to present this plan to you. We were very excited to do that this evening after the 2 years that we've worked on it. And as you know, this document is mandated by both our town charter and the state, and it requires your approval. It was very satisfying to hear the committee reports again, not just here this evening, but at the district meetings, because you've picked up on all of the key points that we were trying to get across. And that is that Greenwich remains committed to reinforcing who we are, and that beyond our natural advantages like proximity to New York City, we have created a sense of place in our built environment such that people want to live here. And we are a community who values top education, top healthcare, and top town services. And we have figured out how to get what we want and can still boast a low tax rate. The point is that we are a tremendously successful community. But the question is, how do we maintain our leadership position, our status as the best? How do we add value when we have a well-established land use pattern that we don't want to change? How are land use decisions impacted by policies at the state level that challenge our efforts to control spending, particularly when the demand for services is only increasing? How should our land use decisions change when we are faced with ever-increasing costs and fluctuating market conditions? How do we reach our goals when the demand for services and updated, accessible, and energy-efficient school facilities, town services, and infrastructures are always increasing? To answer these questions, we looked at what got us here in the first place, and then we met with everybody we could to understand how we want to proceed from here. The result of that effort is this POCD, which is focused on positioning Greenwich for the future. Supported by extensive public engagement, constant research and data collection, the vision outlined herein is to, quote, preserve Greenwich as a premier residential community by enhancing our exceptional neighborhoods, schools, environments, and cultural and recreational amenities, while focusing investment in the town's infrastructure, school facilities, storm resiliency measures, and the downtown core as the means to increasing the town's value. And that's all very nice, you may say, but how? How are we really going to do that? And when you read through the plan, you'll see we have 6 guiding principles. The first is to preserve our community character and sense of place. We had a public planning meeting at Greenwich High School last year with over 80 participants, and from that we agreed to work on a landscaping plan for the Post Road corridor, make streetscape improvements, address signage, add to our impressive inventory of public art, and bury unsightly power lines. We know this excites the Riverside Association in particular, who have been very strong advocates for creating a sense of place in their section of the Post Road, so one knows they are in Riverside like you do when you're in downtown Greenwich. We've had several sessions with the Greenwich Board of Realtors. We are committed to study FAR and height and other building controls as a result of those meetings so that they are simple enough to explain to newcomers and less dependent on professionals. The plan calls for developing a tree preservation ordinance on private property. This has been on the radar of many environmental groups for years. This ordinance will be tricky because we must ensure the appropriate balance between private property rights and the public good. You all will be the determinant of that balance because that ordinance has to come back before you. The second guiding principle is to develop housing opportunities for the future. 95% of the parcels in town are zoned for residential use, and our residents want to keep it that way. We worked with groups like the Commission on Aging, Housing Authority, countless private property owners. We invited in Tamar Laurie, a well-known figure in Greenwich real estate community, to learn what resonates with her clientele. We learned we need to offer innovative, high-quality, green, physically accessible to all housing options beyond the single-family residence. We need reasonably priced housing to attract young families who will invest in the community. We need options for our seniors who may want to downsize. And we need options for the 60% of the town employees and the 60% of the Board of Education employees who currently live outside of town. That's 2,200 employees who could be spending more of their time at work instead of at commuting. The plan speaks to promoting hidden housing like accessory apartments, identifying illegal apartments, and most importantly, removing barriers to people with disabilities in existing developments. Guiding principle number 3 is to provide top quality educational facilities, meeting with the Board of Ed, the heads of private schools, the BET, and individuals such as Abby Large, Susan Fahey, Leslie Tarkington, and Ashley Cole, helped us understand the complexity of school issues, given that schools are a huge draw to any community. Most of our schools are in residential neighborhoods, and neighbors to Greenwich High School in particular have been vocal about how the traffic affects their life. These conversations led to action items that would address traffic, protect privacy, increase buffer space, as well as planting requirements between institutional and residential uses, particularly around parking lots, auditorium spaces, and athletic facilities. Guiding principle number 4 is to sustain and improve our natural environment and landscape. As you likely noted in the resolution, we are asking you to acknowledge that the 2002 open space plan shall remain in force. A question was raised by Philip Dodson and supported by Peter Berg, both of whom were members of an ad hoc committee formed in 2015. As I noted to them, and so there is no confusion, I want to repeat it here to you, that any open space plan going forward will be brought back to this RTM as an amendment to the POCD. We will work with the ad hoc committee in addition to other stakeholders to craft the new document. And assuming you move the resolution forward, the 2002 open space plan is the one we will be working off of until such time as you approve the amendment. The language in the plan, in the POCD, has been confirmed to be legally sound by the law department. Other tasks include reviewing conservation subdivision regulations, which is particularly relevant in the backcountry, where the intent is, quote from the plan, to preserve the rural character, promote development that results in a large percentage of open space, and retains natural features such as wooded area, rugged topography, rock outcroppings, and streams. Guiding principle number 5 is to maintain economic vitality in thriving commercial centers. The plan refers to upgrading the zoning regulations, streamlining and clarifying the process of establishing a business in Greenwich, reviewing the town's notification to abutting property owners, seeking out new, non-intrusive means to ensure greater awareness of pending applications, strengthening downtown as the central business district of Greenwich and the core of the community. And how do we do that? By continuing to explore the dredging of Greenwich Harbor, working with the appropriate groups to allow for an arts installation and improved lighting on the Steamboat Road underpass for a safer and better pedestrian experience. We worked with Tom Torelli, Paul Bugliese, Alicia Kalishin, Julie Ferrari-Zelinsky, Joe Tranfone, Scott Mitchell, who, if you know them, are all downtown property owners who met with us several times to discuss improving parking in the downtown and how to do it through segregating employees from the consumer parking. The last guiding principle is to provide the best quality infrastructure, municipal facilities, cultural institutions, and health services. We have spent some time over the last week talking about the firehouse and Nathaniel Witherell, which is noted in the plan as an asset that should be retained. The plan does not address whether it should be a town asset, but just acknowledging that the public input was that at 92% occupancy, it is a service that is needed. I mentioned previously meeting with the Greenwich Board of Realtors, who in addition to other leaders in business, informed us that the healthcare industry is one we must keep a close eye on, as it is gaining strength to parallel the hedge fund industries in terms of where we can add value. Finally, on to implementation, which is a key part of this plan. John Lucarelli, Rick Crowell, and other members of the Greenwich Property Owners Association were instrumental here. When we thought we had it down, the Chamber of Commerce organized a meeting with representatives from each neighborhood association where the ideas were presented, discussed, and adjusted. Implementation will be transparent, it will have accountability, and it has a prioritization system. It is based on substantial data collection, particularly demographic and economic analysis that we commissioned from 2 consultants. The first, our consultant from Chicago, and the second one that we use from Connecticut that we use regularly. The plan outlines the aspirations and ideals of the community. The plan does not commit the town to spend money. The plan is heavily focused on planning efforts, including more data collection and in-depth focus groups that will be critical to ensure we are focused on adding value to our community. We will continue to be reaching out to stakeholders. Most importantly, we will report to you on an annual basis, and we will formally request your satisfaction with the plan every 2 years. If based on updated data, we need to change course together, we will do that. Potential demographic shifts that Mr. Berg has already mentioned, which we will learn much more about post the 2020 census, is one reason why we're recommending this biennial review. We believe that the plan is ready, and we have respectfully submitted it for your approval, and I thank you so much for your time and attention.
Thank you. Mr. Tuthill.
Mr. Moderator, I move for all speakers be limited to 3 minutes per item.
Okay. Is there a second? It has been moved and seconded to limit debate for this item number 4 to, was this for the balance of the meeting? All right. Mr. Tuthill has moved and it has been seconded to limit debate for all speakers to 3 minutes per item. Now, let's clarify that, Mr. Tuthill. Are you saying that when you say per item, someone who has spoken and used 3 minutes, and now we have a motion to amend or a motion to postpone? Are you saying item on the call? You're saying on the call?
Item on the call.
Does everybody understand that? All right. Now, normally, a motion to limit debate is not itself debatable. However, that's when it applies just to a single item. When it applies for the balance of the meeting, believe it or not, it is debatable. Discussion on Mr. Tuthill's motion to limit debate for the balance of the meeting. Mr. Detchen. District 10.
I would suggest to Mr. Tuthill that it be referenced as 3 minutes per item or motion.
Well, I think he was pretty clear that that's not what he wanted to do. Further discussion on Mr. Tuthill's motion to limit debate to 3 minutes per item. And Mr. Tuthill, you're making no allowance for a proponent to have more than 3 minutes. All right. Further discussion on Mr. Tuthill's motion. Mr. Rainey?
I'd like to make a motion to amend Mr. Tuthill's motion, which is 3 minutes per motion and 5 minutes for the principal proponent and opponent.
Okay, that is in order. Is there a second? It has been moved and seconded to amend Mr. Tuthill's motion to something more like what we normally adopt, which is 5 minutes. This is 5 minutes for proponent and principal opponent, the latter to be determined by the moderator, I presume?
Yes, sir.
and 3 minutes for everyone else per motion. All right, discussion on Mr. Rainey's motion to amend. I will call for a voice vote in the first instance. Now, we're not voting on any limit. We're just saying, should Mr. Tuthill's motion be amended in the manner described by Mr. Rainey? This only requires a majority vote to adopt the amendment. It will ultimately require a 2/3 majority to adopt a limit. So, all those in favor of changing Mr. Tuthill's limit to apply only to motions and to allow the 5 minutes for proponent and principal opponent, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? No. Well, because Mr. Dudakis lends so much volume to that, it's hard for me to tell. So, shall we try a rising vote? All those in favor of Mr. Rainey's amendment, please rise. All right, thank you. All those opposed? That motion has been adopted. All right, so we are now considering this motion to limit debate as Mr. Rainey has proposed. I will call for a voice vote. Requires a 2/3 majority. All those in favor of the motion to limit debate, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? No. Motion has carried. All right, so we now have this limit in effect. It applies 3 minutes per motion. I will now continue where we left off. Mr. Berg, to be followed by Sandy Waters.
Good evening again. So you've heard the POCD as being described as an aspirational document. Some people call it an advisory document, but it's not to be taken lightly. It does have a legal standing. It is the basis for changes to zoning and to land use regulations. It is the basis upon which you and your constituents can oppose a zoning change or a municipal improvement. So it is important. There's a list of challenges on page 12, and one of my concerns is that there is very little data in this plan that informs us about those challenges or what we can do about them. And I'm going to mention 5 examples. The POCD before us correctly shows that the population of Greenwich has stayed around 60,000 persons for the last 50 years. But it does not talk about how our population has shifted. Our downtown Greenwich has lost over 40% of its population, while Pemberwick gained 40%, North Miamis over 60%, and other neighborhoods have grown. Our downtown population declined, mostly because household size dwindled. We want a vibrant downtown, but can we have a vibrant downtown if there are few residents living there? Number 2, the state of Connecticut is projecting Greenwich's total population to decline by a whopping 20% by the year 2040. This is due to our aging population, shrinking household size, and declining birth rate. Number 3, the Greenwich Board of Education has projected our public school enrollment will drop from around 9,000 to around 8,000 in just 10 years. That drop of 1,000 students is equal to the enrollment of over 2 elementary schools. Number 4, there are only 5 racially imbalanced elementary schools in Connecticut, and Greenwich has 2 of them. An estimated 30% of Greenwich school-age residents now attend private schools. Diversity is our strength, but racial imbalance is a serious challenge. Number 5, the percentage of Greenwich households in poverty, including Alice, the working poor, is approaching 30% according to the United Way.
30 seconds.
The percentage of public school students eligible for free and reduced lunch has increased from 10% to 15% according to the Board of Ed. In conclusion, I have asked for an appendix with demographic data that will make a stronger, bolder plan. I'm willing to wait for the 2020 census, but I'm hoping I don't have to give these same remarks 2 years from today. Thank you.
Thank you. Sandy Waters to be followed by Lucy Von Brockel.
Good evening. My name is Sandy Waters, and I'm the president of the League of Women Voters, representing nearly 400 members in this, its 100th year of continuous operation in Greenwich. The League urges you to approve the November 2019 draft Greenwich Plan of Conservation and Development, which is before you tonight. The League reviewed the draft from the perspective of our extensive land use planning position adopted in 1995 and last amended in 2005. From a process perspective, the League notes that the plan currently under consideration fulfills our recommendations previously approved by our membership. To review and update existing land use goals in light of current development pressures and the irreversible impact of development. To coordinate land use actions among all branches of town government. To educate and actively involve residents in land use planning. And to formulate and/or strengthen town policies and measures to achieve the plan's stated goals. Over the years, the League has sponsored numerous educational forums on wide-ranging land use topics such as smart growth, stormwater management, and clear cutting of trees. The plan you are considering recognizes trends like climate change, on-demand transportation, and an aging population, and proposes strategies to address them. It recognizes the value of keeping residential neighborhoods intact and maintaining the variety and beauty of natural landscapes, while it also promotes development of thriving and distinctive commercial areas, effectively balancing the challenges both of development and conservation. It actively engaged residents in a multi-year process which provided ample public input to make the draft ready for RTM approval. It makes many recommendations for policies and measures to achieve the goals, and it has an implementation component outlining the town agencies and others at times needed to achieve those goals. Approving this plan now will ensure that any grants or advantages that may result can be realized sooner rather than later. I urge you to approve the draft tonight. Thank you.
Lucy Von Brockel to be followed by Richard Hine.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Lucy Von Brockel, District 4. Planning and Zoning and our Planning and Zoning Commissioners have spent 2 years gathering all of this information from our constituents, hundreds, possibly thousands of them, I don't know. I personally went to at least 12 meetings and read 3 drafts because I saw that as doing my due diligence. We were invited to do that. We were given that information by Planning and Zoning, and I saw that as part of my duty here to get that done. Maybe I went a little overboard going to 12, but that's me. So I also feel that because this is a document that was put together by our constituents, that we need to be sensitive to the fact that they contributed a lot. And for us to set it forward so that we can, try and make something that will never be perfect is a waste of everyone's time, frankly. It's a strong document. It's not perfect, it won't please all of you, but it's not going to do us any harm. It will do us a lot of good. It's not a strategic plan. We have, it's not triggering any spending or head count or anything like that. It's not dangerous. So I urge you to pass this plan and support our constituents and support Planning and Zoning in this unprecedented effort of theirs to get public input on such an important document for us. Thank you.
Richard Hine to be followed by Francia Alvarez.
Good evening. My name is Richard Hine. I am a member of the ARC, the Architectural Review Committee. I happen to be the chairman this year. We, as you know, are volunteers who live in the community. I happen to be an architect. We have architects, graphic designers, landscape designers, specialists in the field. We are privileged to review projects on behalf of the town, and we make advisory comments, which the Planning and Zoning Commission can elect to either ignore or accept. We hope to make a contribution to P&Z deliberations. This document, which I've read, I've attended at least half the public sessions, and I've read every single word of this many times. This is a living document. My committee is on the front line to protect the character of the town of Greenwich. When applicants come to us, they come with their vision. This is the vision that the town has spoken, is the vision that the town wants us to protect. And the words in this document will help us, will help my committee in protecting the character of the town. Thank you.
Francia Alvarez, to be followed by Joanne Messina.
Good evening. First, thank you to Katie DeLuca and Margarita Alvin and their teams for the 2 years they have spent working on the POCD. As a member of the Land Use Committee and as a resident, I attended many meetings, as did other residents, nonprofits, environmental organizations, and RTM members to voice their vision for our town's future. There was a focus on how to protect and enhance our historic heritage, natural landscape, and New England charm. Residents want to continue the successes of our great schools, strong economic base, and low taxes. From this enormous fact-finding endeavor, a plan was born. I believe that this document represents the heart and soul of our community. In the first year, attendance was terrific at an engaging public meeting at Greenwich High School. Outreach activities for the POCD included 39 public workshops, online tools to gather input, and approximately 50 other meetings to discuss edits. All input was welcome. In August, an email draft of the POCD was distributed to the RTM. Every member of the RTM had an opportunity to read the document and voice their opinions. Input was given. Changes were made. And at our September RTM meeting, over 80 copies of the POCD were picked up, and the website link received 500 hits. The Greenwich High School public workshop was advertised for a few days later. I attended that meeting in the auditorium, but it was very disappointing as the attendance was poor. Where was everybody? We were in the home stretch of a 2-year effort, but clearly interest had been waning, and our time had expired. We are no longer eligible for the discretionary state funding, and now a waiver is required. But there is a mechanism, as Katie talked about, that's in place for the 2019 POCD to amend it every 2 years. In 2020, the U.S. Census will be taken, and the additional data will help guide the amendment process. So here we are faced with a request for postponement coming up.
No, not yet.
Here we are faced with a potential request for postponement of approval of the POCD. But there are many members here tonight ready to vote on the document submitted for approval. The RTM elected the members of the Planning and Zoning Commission.
30 seconds.
It is time to let the commission finish their job. This is the 2019 POCD. The year is coming to an end, and it is now time to cross the finish line. It is a sound and well-vetted document. I urge you to vote not to postpone and to allow us to vote on the original motion to approve the 2019 Plan of Conservation and Development. Thank you.
Joanne Messina, to be followed by Louisa Stone. We're not debating the motion to postpone.
Great. Good evening, Moderator Byrne, RTM members and guests. I'm Joanne Messina, the Executive Director of the Greenwich Tree Conservancy, and I'm joined here by our President, Cheryl Dunson. The Tree Conservancy is a nonprofit that promotes the preservation and enhancement of the tree and forest resources of Greenwich to benefit the community. We have partnered with the town for 13 years to reach this goal. With that partnership, we have planted over 4,000 trees on public lands in Greenwich, just this year reaching our goal of 500. I come before you this evening to ask that you pass the POCD unanimously. This plan is thorough, well-organized, and comprehensive. This plan distinguishes itself in many areas. Most notably, it identifies significant town trends, for example, increased potential for and frequency of damaging storms, on-demand transportation, and proposes approaches to address these, such as developing tree preservation as a key to maintaining and enhancing our natural landscape. It speaks specifically to a town-wide tree planting plan, greening our parking lots, which we have already begun to do, and looking at our streetscape, which is so valuable. It also recognizes that our residential neighborhoods are among our top advantages as a town, but that we must also promote thriving and distinctive commercial areas. I had the privilege of working on the last POCD and discussing just that. This puts that into specific, manageable goals. It also stresses the importance of developing municipal key indicators and the need to track progress against them. Implementation, as we know, is just so very, very important. The process began by P&Z in early 2018 and has continued for 2 years. In addition to extensive community input sessions, the P&Z specifically invited RTM members to sessions in August, September, and October of this year. Draft copies are online, and all were encouraged to get hard copies of drafts and comment.
30 seconds.
I and my colleagues did many times, and all suggestions were heard if not incorporated. This is a P&Z document that has had 2 years of opportunities for resident input, which I hope included many of you. This is a 2019 plan which should be passed this year. May 2019 was the official 10-year deadline. So as of May, 7 months ago, waivers must be requested to get any state grant
Thank you very
monies.
much.
Thank you.
Louisa Stone to be followed by Catherine LaBalbo.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Good evening. This is the third plan of conservation development I've been involved in, and I must say it was an amazing document. The commission, the whole community have contributed to it. It is by far the most comprehensive plan we've ever had. I think it will stay in the archives of the Historical Society as a mark of what we have been and what we hope to be. The public has seen what's been going on for the past 10 years. The old 2009 plan is out of date. We have to get on top of this and plan for the future. This plan gives highest priority to what the public wants. We were elected 2 years ago to represent our neighbors, and if we, I'm going to address postponement, Mr. Moderator. If we postpone this, a new RTM would be looking at the very same plan. If we refer it to a committee, we're just kicking the can down the road. By the way, the RTMs will be able to look at it every 2 years. We are responsible for approving the plan of conservation and development. We are responsible for approving the town budget. Don't shirk your responsibility by postponing it to a future RTM. Let's vote for the plan now, tonight.
Catherine LaBalbo to be followed by Sue Baker.
Good evening, everyone. Actually, so rarely do I get to speak on something that I have a formal knowledge on. So I am putting forth my expert statements here based on the fact that in the past 3 years, I have worked on 3 state grants to return millions of dollars of state funding to to local municipalities in the state of Connecticut. Actually, tomorrow morning at about 6 a.m., I'll be driving up to Hartford to do just that. So the state general statute is section 8-23, and it reads that if a plan is not amended decennially, the chief elected official of the municipality shall submit a letter to the Secretary of the Office of Policy and Management and the Commissioners of Transportation, that's Greenwich's Bridges and Streets, Energy and Environmental Protection, that's Greenwich's dredging projects, and Economic and Community Development, that's the Community Development Grant Block Programs. That explains why a plan was not amended. A copy of the letter will be included in each application by the municipality for discretionary state funding. The municipality fails to comply with the requirements of this section shall be ineligible for discretionary state funding unless such prohibition is expressly waived by the Secretary. What that means is each time we apply for a grant, we are asking for our non-compliance to be waived by the state. If you do not vote to support this plan tonight, you are voting to have Greenwich's purse strings controlled by delegation in Hartford each and every time we go to the state for a variety of projects. And that is, again, the Commissioners of Transportation, Energy and Environmental Protection, and Economic and Community Development. Thank you.
Sue Baker, that's the last speaker on the list.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. My name is Sue Baker, and I'm a member of the Conservation Commission and the Shellfish Commission of the Town of Greenwich. As such, I've been involved in the last two, 2009 and 2019 POCDs. And as been stated, there have been multiple opportunities in the last 2 years for everybody to be involved and to be heard. And you were heard, and your suggestions were honored, and there have been multiple drafts presented with the changes that you have suggested. So it was a little alarming to hear from Ms. Jansen that so many people on the RTM had not read this documentary. It is large, as was stated, 143 pages, but it does address the most important things. You've heard, it is only a plan. It is advisory to P&Z. It is not, as been said, written in stone, and it's not the law, but it's a great plan, a bit of a blueprint to follow going forward for the next several years. It deals with conservation. I so care about the protection of natural places, historic places, open spaces. All of that is addressed. I think it will be a challenge for you to get through this in the next several months if you haven't addressed it already. So I would suggest that after all you've heard today, that you proceed with accepting this excellent 2019 POCD, Plan of Conservation and Development, as was presented to and accepted at the November 12th meeting of the Planning and Zoning Commission. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, that was the last speaker on that list. Then there's this list. Kim Fiorello. But she's the last speaker on this list.
Kimberly Fiorello from District 7. What I'm hearing a lot of tonight is a sense of urgency that this has to be passed tonight. There was a call to fear that something could happen if we don't pass it tonight. Me personally, when I hear words like visionary and comprehensive plans, it always gives me pause. When I looked at this plan, there are 170 action plans. If you vote on this tonight, can you go out and tell people what you voted for? Do you clearly understand what you're voting for tonight? For me personally, I like to make sure that I clearly understand and that things make some common sense to me. And I don't think there's anything wrong with erring on the side of caution and prudence. And I would urge that we do not pass this POCD. And in the spirit of the discussions that have happened already, that we continue to engage with our constituents and make sure that this is the best document and that each of us in this room can go back to our constituents and explain to them in our own words what is in this document. And we should each make sure we understand the 170 action items on the back page of this document. So, thank you.
All right, I'll now give the floor to the committee chairs who are interested in making a motion to postpone. Lucia Jansen. Any other committee chair or district that is interested in offering a motion to postpone? I invite you forward.
Good evening. I appreciate the words spoken by the speakers who want an immediate approval tonight. I will speak to the experience of the Budget Overview Committee in that, once again, for
better or worse, there were multiple versions of the POCD. There was a public meeting. What was picked up by many members was the September version. There were 2 versions after that, an October and a November version, or whatever the October, November. There were just multiple versions. Others wanted the time to synthesize, review the prioritization, and to understand so they could explain what was in the document. They simply had not done it. It is one thing to be at a public hearing. It is another thing to receive the document with everything in writing and how it was synthesized. So it was just a request to have that 1 month. We had only asked for a month. I would also like to address the notion that we have 50 new members. As I'm expressing to you, members in this room right now have not read the POCD.
All right, excuse me. We are not asking for comments from those who are listening. The speaker has the floor. Anything else is out of order.
So some members have not read the POCD. It is simply a request to allow all members to digest the information and to vote thoughtfully in January. Thank you.
Are you making a motion?
Yes, I repeat the motion to postpone to January the vote on the POCD.
And this is offered on behalf of the Budget Overview Committee.
Yes, and the vote was 11-0-0, unanimous support. District 2 absent.
All right, Mr. Pirelli-Minetti, did I hear you say the Finance Committee similarly
Yes.
supported a motion postponed?
Yes, your Finance Committee similarly supported a move to postpone to January by a vote of 11-0-0, District 6 absent. I'll speak only briefly. I appreciate the fact that there was a lot of public input, tremendous effort, and all the speakers that spoke to that. That's to be commended. I think that one of the unfortunate facts of life, however, is that until you actually have a completed document, until it's before you, many of the people who are active on the RTM and involved with various committees work very hard. They don't focus on items until they come before them. So when this item comes before our committees as a massive document at once, it seems to me that it's only reasonable to allow the RTM a month or so to really read it and understand it. I would hate to say, we have to pass it to see what's in it, but that's kind of what it sounds like. The urgency, if this was really so urgent to have it in place, and it expired last May, we should have had it before last May. I think we would be much better served by allowing all of the members, the new members and the existing members, to focus on the document, have an awareness that it's now actually before the RTM, and be able to review it in depth. Thank you.
All right, so we currently have a motion to postpone item 4 to our January meeting. Those were offered on behalf of our committees, do not require a second. Discussion on the pending motion to postpone to January. Mr. Eddy? Be followed by Mr. Deitch.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator, members of the meeting. I'm just going to review a few things we've heard already, and I respect the words of our fellow members over here, that it's always important for us to have an understanding of what we're voting on, so it's always important for us to be confident that we're making the right and responsible decision. I do want to point out again, there were 2 years of community input on this. The plan itself, for the first time, is offering quarterly meetings that go over planning, biennial review of the plan's effect, so that it can be an iterative process and we can be refining it. I would ask that you, when you're considering whether or not it's responsible to pass this, there's one other item here. This is put together by a group of people, the Planning and Zoning Commission, that arguably has the greatest workload by far of any appointed group in town. And anybody in this body who has taken it upon themselves or been part of a group of people to bring a significant resolution before this body for passage understands that every month that it is postponed is a tremendous drain on the work that you should be doing otherwise. Now, that is just something that needs to be considered in this case. If we're asking ourselves, is it responsible to pass this, we should also be asking ourselves what that information and the other information we have about what it provides for iterative review, is it a responsible thing right now to postpone it? My opinion is that it's not. I hope you'll consider that.
Mr. Detchen. Any other speakers are invited to come forward.
I think I had a couple of observations. One is, this is in fact a guidance document. It's not intended to find solutions to all the problems we may think exist in the town. You don't even want that, because the problems we may have 2, 4, 5 years from now may not even be those that we can anticipate at this point. I think the key issue for us here is, what is our standard of review as we sit here tonight as the RTM? We are at the end of a long process. I would suggest to you that we're not intended to review this document de novo from the very beginning to try to weed out any problems that we think there are in any one particular passage. I would suggest to you that our standard of review is, given the entire process, given what we've heard in the various public hearings, even given what we've heard in the last week since this was presented to us, do we as a body believe that this POCD is reasonable, rational, pragmatic, sensible, and a useful document going forward? It's not a standard review where we say we don't like this clause or we don't like that clause. The important point here is we have the final say, but our say is in the context of, do we think the process and the product of that process is reasonable? It's not, do we think it's perfect? One last point, and that is this list of capital projects that are on pages 122 and 123. It's important that everybody understands that those items are listed because they're mentioned in the prior POCD. It is not an endorsement of those projects. It is simply saying those were in the prior POCD. They presumably conform to that POCD, and going forward, presumably they would continue to conform to the POCD. But it does not constitute an endorsement of any of those projects. And none of those projects can go forward without, in fact, going through the entire process that we have in the town for approving such projects. It simply means if and when those projects would be approved, they would, in fact, conform with the POCD. I would suggest to you that we've had a sufficient opportunity to review this document in light of what should be our appropriate standard of review. Is this a reasonable document that we can rely on going forward, period?
The speaker behind you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Svetlana Wasserman. I am a new member from District 10 who came in September. I wanted to just explain my experience with the POCD. I moved to Greenwich in March. In that time, I had time to read both versions of the POCD that came out. And in the discussion I'm hearing tonight, I'm kind of reminded of my kids when they have projects due at school. And if they came up to me on the day that their project was due and said, you know what, I didn't finish it, can I have an extension? I would say to them, there are no extensions in real life, okay? And I'm worried about the precedents that we would be setting when we know when the deadline is for review of a project, and we just come in and say, sorry, can we have an extension? So I would really urge us all to vote tonight. We had plenty of time to review this document. It's a good one. There's a ton of work that went into it. Thank you very much.
Dan, quickly.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Those of you who've heard me speak before know, I always like to say things that haven't been said, so I'm glad no one said what I'm going to say. But in reference to the prior speaker, there are actually extensions in real life because we have before us the ability to extend this. No one, I think, is doubting the veracity of the document or the work that went into it. It's fabulous. I have read it. I went to 3 meetings of the POCD where it was proposed. It's an outstanding document that does lay a great blueprint for the future of Greenwich. But the question that no one's asked anyone tonight, which is really what we should be voting on, is how many people in this room who are RTM members have read the document? Can we see a show of hands? How many have not read the document? 2 people in the room have not read the document. I don't know. Kind of blew a hole in one.
You want to test them?
Mr. Moderator, I was hoping for a little bit more, maybe some more honesty among the classmates here tonight. No one's going to get in trouble if you didn't read the document. No one's going to follow you.
Why don't you give them a test?
Yeah. Well, my point was going to be if we had enough people who had not read the document, that we should actually extend to January. And I did vote as a member of the Finance Committee to extend to January. I still believe that giving another month to look at the document and analyze it, not to find imperfections, not to try and hone it so it's perfect, but so that everyone here, as a prior speaker did say before, can answer questions that their constituents may have. Even though an incredible 99% of the people in this room have read the document in all 140 pages of its glory, I'm not sure we could all answer the questions we would need to answer to our constituents. I think it's going to pass. I think a ton of work went into it. It's outstanding. It lays a fantastic blueprint for the future of our town. You may not agree with all of it, but I do believe that erring on the side of prudence in this matter is not a bad thing. And that maybe if there's 1 or 2 more people who haven't read it in its entirety, it will give them the chance to finally do it. Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Thank you.
Alana Hines? What?
Hi, Alana Hines, District 1. I just wanted to say that I do not agree with what Mr. Jetson just said. It is our job to review things. It is our job to look at the words. We do that extensively in other documents. So to have somebody get up and say, well, we should just accept the plan without de novo reviewing it sort of goes against what we typically do as a body. So, I think in the spirit of that, while not stating whether I agree or disagree with the plan, I do think we need to hew to the way we normally operate, and that is what we just voted on a second reading, and also actually having a very thorough review and having people feel confident that they've reviewed line by line what has gone into it. And maybe everyone has, as Dan's vote showed, but I don't agree, nor do I think it should be stated publicly to this group that it's not our job to review things. That's exactly what we were elected to do. So I would be in favor of taking a little bit more time and actually making sure that people are confident they've reviewed and are comfortable with the language. I have read the whole thing, and there are things that I personally find contradictory within the language, but I'd like to get some maybe more answers on that. So I think I'm in support of another month to do the job we were elected to do.
Tom Broadhurst?
Mr. Moderator, fellow members, earlier tonight we passed item 2, which requires a second reading of things. I would vote for this tonight. I think it's a great document. I think we should put it in place. I also think that based on what we voted earlier this evening to do a second reading, we should do a second reading and then pass it in January.
Aaron Leonard?
Good evening, fellow RTM members. The constituency has been mentioned a lot, and I will tell you, we were contacted by the constituency. So here is what the constituency thinks, and I quote, "I hope you will accept this observation about the RTM wishing to possibly weigh in and possibly amend the plan of conservation and development being presented to you. My belief is that any further adjustment or amending, now that the plan has been vetted for a year, more than that actually, seems absurd. For months, hearings have been held by the planners to which the public lent input. The RTM could have done so too. Speaking up now makes the RTM look rather late to the game. My feeling is your group is simply out of line with the suggestion to go back and rework the POCD. One opinion, but a constituent. Thank you.
Brian Rainey.
I'm sorry, Mr. Moderator, I have to disagree with the previous speaker. This was a process. Everything went in and was filtered through the P&Z. That is not pure feedback of everything coming through our constituents. It was filtered, winnowed down, and summarized, and presented to us this way. I disagree with the previous speaker, and I'm in favor of postponement.
Further discussion on the motion to postpone? Will the district chairs please mark your voting cards? BOC and Finance Committee motions to postpone item 4 to the January meeting and proceed to poll your delegation. We will need to await the result of that vote before we can proceed further. So after you have voted, and I ask that you allow the district chairs to conduct the vote expeditiously, but this might be a time to get up and stretch. Somebody, Mr. Detchen?
I expressed no opinion.
All right, we are voting on the motion to postpone item 4 to the January meeting. If you want to postpone it, you vote yes. If you want to defeat that motion to postpone, you vote no. And we would then continue with item 4. Motion to postpone item 4 to the January meeting. Those in favor, 65, opposed 107, abstaining 0. That motion to postpone has failed. Further discussion on item 4. All right, can we get everybody back?
No, they're going. You just go straight.
All right, item 4. Any further discussion on the item? Will the district chairs please mark your voting cards, item number 4, and proceed to poll your delegation. Item number 5 comes before us. May we have the resolution on that item? Peter Bernstein, Chair of our Board of Education.
Thank you. I think Judge Brand called me Senator Bernstein earlier. It does sound good, but that's not my job. Move that the sum of $245,000 be the same as hereby appropriated from the Reserve Capital and Non-Recurring Fund to account Z6801689, Project TBD for costs associated with the mechanical system upgrade at GHS.
Will the member please move the adoption of the resolution? Resolution on item 5 has been moved and seconded. May we have the reports of the committees that considered this item? Beginning with Kimberly Blank, Chair of our Education Committee.
Good evening. Peter Bernstein, Chairman of the Board of Ed, and Superintendent Dr. Tony Jones presented this item to us. The Board of Education is asking for an interim capital appropriation of $245,000 for work on the Greenwich High School boilers. There are 2 boilers at the high school that are 25 years old. They were slated for replacement in 2022 as per the Board of Ed's capital plan. The Board of Ed already had $50,000 appropriated for maintenance work on these boilers in last year's budget. They knew that the boilers were not running efficiently and had asked for money to do repairs. When their contractor, EMCOR, began this maintenance work, they found that there were many tubes that were leaking or had serious corrosion. Each boiler has 272 tubes. Boiler 1 is currently being repaired, and the facility is relying on Boiler 2 for heat. Boiler 2 is manufactured at the same time as Boiler 1 and is already showing signs of leaks. The Board of Ed would like to replace all of the tubes in both boilers. They believe that this will extend the useful life of the boilers by 10 to 15 years. They will not be requesting the $1.5 million that they had slated for fiscal year 2021 for boiler replacement. We have several questions about the warranty on the new tubes, the likelihood that there could be another source of failure on the boilers, or the possibility of repairing only one boiler and then replacing the second. The Board of Ed said that their contractor has advised them that replacing the tubing should extend the useful life 10 to 15 years. They pointed out that often older equipment is manufactured to higher standards than new equipment, and workmen suggest repair rather than replacement. They said that there was a workman's warranty on the work performed and on the tubes, but no guarantee on the extended life of the boilers. They felt it was important to have both boilers replaced at the same time, or repaired at the same time, and replacement work couldn't happen until the summer anyway because of the risk of being left without a working boiler in the winter. The repair work can continue during the winter, reducing the risk to the facility. We passed this item with a vote of 9-0-0, districts 1, 2, and 3 absent.
Thank you. Rob Pirelli-Minetti with the Finance Committee report.
Your Finance Committee first took this item up last Monday night. The Board of Education didn't make it to our meeting, which resulted in the vote of 0-11-0, which you saw in our report that was distributed earlier. As we mentioned in our report, we met, we planned to meet, and we did in fact meet this evening at 7:30 here in Central Middle School. We had representatives, we had the superintendent, the chair of the Board of Education, and Dan Watson, who's the facilities guy on this, so they were out in force, and we discussed the item at length. We had a number of the same questions that were raised by the Education Committee, but we did learn a few things that were interesting, and I thought I would share with you. First, the work is already underway, and they've taken the money as at the request of the BET from the operating budget, and really what this item is doing is to take and return the money to the operating budget. So that was what was explained to us by Peter Bernstein, and he showed us an email, in fact, that told them to take the money from the operating budget. So the work is being done in any event. Our vote tonight was 9-0-1, with districts 4 and 7 absent. The abstention, which I think reflects a bit of concern by the committee, and that was over the process issue of the work actually being underway and the money not having been appropriated, that it was coming through the operational budget. But we did support the project. We think that it's important to keep everything in the maintenance. There were a number of concerns expressed about the ongoing maintenance problems, and especially in view of forthcoming large capital projects that we'll be seeing from the Board of Education over the next few years. We're very concerned that the Board of Education manage the maintenance of the existing facilities before they start spending tens of millions or hundreds of millions. Thank you.
Thank you. Discussion on item 5. Will the district chairs please mark your voting cards? Item number 5, and proceed to poll your delegation. Item number 6 now comes before us. Police Chief Jim Hebe with the resolution on item number 6.
Mr. Moderator, RTM members, resolved that the sum of $440,239 be hereby appropriated to be added to the following account known as range improvements.
Will the member please move the adoption of the resolution? Resolution on item 6 has been moved and seconded. Arlene Lamazzo, Chair of our Public Works Committee.
We were aided in our discussion by Deputy Chief Mark Marino. He explained that this facility located on Steamboat Road is in a building that houses the Coscow Gun Club and the police range. The club occupies the first floor and the police occupy the second floor. The range has had no improvements to its interior physical structure, quote, as long as I have been in the force, which is 37 years. In the past, shooting practice consisted of a series of lanes, kind of like bowling alley lanes, each a straight lane, with a target at the far end. The officers were practicing in a static position. However, nowadays, the training has to be much more varied. There has to be room for practice that involves targets that are moving, which we all know is happening with school and public shootings. Safety and building codes have changed radically, and this range does not meet any of those codes. Ventilation is subpar. Since this is an interim appropriation, the chief reminded us that it was very rare for the department to ask for one. It is because they want to get started as soon as possible so that they will be ready in case they have a situation that requires the ability to do what the new training will provide. Questions on the ownership of the building were uncertain, but the chief assured us he would let us know the next day. Also, some members wanted a breakdown of each aspect of the work to be done and its related cost. The chief promised to provide that information. Our vote was 8 in favor, 0 opposed, and 2 abstentions. Districts 5 and 11 abstained in order to wait until the chief got back with the answers that were raised. Thank you. Our vote was 8-0-2, right? Districts 2 and 9 absent.
Rob Corelli, ready with the Finance Committee report.
Your Finance Committee took this up last Monday night. We have been very concerned over interim appropriations coming like this, rather than considering capital projects as part of the regular budget process. We had Deputy Chief Mark Marino, and he gave a good presentation. I think there's very little question that this work probably needs to be done. There have been many changes in the way ranges are designed and developed over the past 35 years. The real question for our committee was, ought this be taken up as an interim appropriation and approved now, or is there any urgency, real emergency of the sort like the boiler, where we really need to get the work done and approved, or is this something that could be dealt with in the ordinary course? And in our discussions with the Deputy Chief, it seemed, based on his responses, that it's not an emergency. The range is working now. There's not a safety issue. That if, in fact, they know that it's going to be approved in the budget and they want to work their scheduling around, they can probably work their scheduling around, so they're not going to lose the ability to use our own range to get adequate training for annual qualification for the officers who need annual qualification. So the result of that was that our committee voted on the motion as planned, 0-11-0, with District 6 absent. Now, that was not a vote against the substance of the notion. The vote was really, we think it belongs in the budget. And we had a second resolution that it was the sense of the Finance Committee that this item deserves to be considered in the annual budget as a worthy project. And that vote was also 11-0-0. Thank you.
Mr. Newman with the Town Services report.
No, this was not referred to us, since we do oversee all operating and capital items for the police department. We voted 10-0-0 to take up this item. This is a 30-year-old structure where the interior has outlived its useful life. The exterior is mostly fine. It does need updating for both new types of ammunition and new types of training tactics. These items, we look at their capital budget over the years, and these items are all in the capital budget already. They're spread over 3 years. So we didn't look at this as much as an interim appropriation or more of a consolidation. Multiple bids came back suggesting consolidating into one job would both be more efficient and save money, and obviously time. If you think about the project, you can't update the interior, which is the backstop and the targeting, without updating the shell that it's all attached to, which is the baffling and the bullet protection. And you can't do that without, their plan is to actually shrink the size of the entire interior of the facility so the ventilation will be much more efficient, and we're changing the ventilation. So just a little piece, this will also save operating costs, because with a range like this, you have to continually change the air so that while you're working in there, you're not exposed to toxic lead fumes and the fumes from the explosives. So with a smaller structure and better ventilation, it will use much less, it'll cost much less to heat and cool. The way we thought about it was, let's not let this get backlogged. It is shovel-ready. We can start this project in 3 months. Again, we don't see it really as an interim appropriation. It will be paid for from budgeting or from bonding. It will not affect our operating budget. Town Services voted 10-0-0 and strongly recommend that we move ahead with this item now.
Thank you. Discussion on item 6. Chief Heavey.
Mr. Moderator, members of RTM, again, thank you for all the good information that was provided. I rise in support of this item. Being chief for 8 years, 1 month and 1 week, and I'm not really counting that. This is the first time I've risen to ask for an interim appropriation. The range does work, but we go to emergencies. I don't want to bring the RTM an emergency. And we recognize that the 37 years old range needs to work. We did try to, we have it in the 15-year plan. It's been approved by the BET, and we've already spent a considerable amount of staff time, both in the purchasing department, police department, and building department to make sure that we can do it in the right way. And as Mr. Newman mentioned, rather than do it in phases, we're going to have some economy of force by doing it all at once. It is something that we had anticipated in our 15-year plan. We know that the cost is fixed for the next few months, but if we come back to you next year, that the cost will have increased, and that same staff time will have to be used to put out other bids, requests for proposals, etc. Again, the range is an important part of our training, and it could create, that lack of training could create a liability. It interrupts our training cycle, and we'd really like to get this project done so that we keep that up. Recently, after 2 months of work, the police department, your police department, was accredited by the state of Connecticut. We became the 39th agency to be accredited out of the 163 in Connecticut, and that was because our policies and procedures and our training met the standards that the state mandates. Part of that is continuous and regular firearms training, and we've been very fortunate to have this facility. If we were to lose a facility by going out of service, which it has done on a couple occasions because that ventilation system that Mr. Newman mentioned has broken down, we lose that opportunity for training. It could cause us, if it was out for an extended period of time, to have our officers go to another facility, which puts them out of town, which puts them out of service, could cause overtime. It really makes better sense to be able to do the training in town where they can mobilize for an emergency from the range if they need to. So again, I appreciate your support, and thank you.
Thank you. Further discussion on item 6. Any other discussion? Will the district chairs please mark your voting cards? Item number 6, and proceed to poll your delegation. I have the result of the vote on item number 4, Plan of Conservation and Development. Those in favor, 148. Opposed, 24. Abstaining, 4. Item 4 has carried. I also have the result of the vote on item 5. That was the GHS mechanical upgrade. Those in favor, 161. Opposed, 10. Abstaining, 4. Item 5 has carried. All right, we're voting on item number 6. The next item is item number 9. have the resolution on that item. This is an appointments committee nomination. Mr. Eddy here. Item number 9.
Thank you for your patience. I forgot I had to read. Okay. Resolved that the following named person nominated by the Appointments Committee be appointed an alternate member A1 of the Flood and Erosion Control Board for a term beginning upon appointment and expiring October 31st, 2023. Donna Laviolette.
Thank you. That being offered on behalf of our Appointments Committee, it does not require a second and is currently before us. May we have the reports of the committees that consider this? Mr. Berg with our Land Use Committee report.
So the Land Use Committee was unable to meet with Ms. Laviolette. We will meet with her in January. So we voted to postpone this item to January.
All right. Do any of the other committees desire to give a report? All right, Arlene Lamazzo with the Public Works Committee report.
We took up item 9, the appointment of Donna Lafayette as the alternate member of Flood Erosion Control Board. She appeared before our committee when she stated her qualifications. Questions were asked about her experience with, quote, mega testing, unquote. Some of us were unfamiliar with what it was. Ms. Laviolette explained that it involved a course for the basics of climate change, flooding, etc. The committee was very impressed with her work history, and we supported her appointment 10-0-0, Districts 2 and 9 absent.
Mr. Eddy, do you care to say anything further?
Mr. Moderator, I think it makes sense just to give the report at the next meeting.
Okay. Ms. Berg? So on behalf of your committee, you are moving to postpone this to January? All right. I will call for a voice vote. All those in favor of postponing item 9 to our January meeting, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? The motion to postpone is carried. Item number 10 now comes before us. All right. This is the one that was referred to the Technology Advisory Group, correct?
Yes.
Mr. Rainey.
The motion is as it appears on the call.
All right. Will the member please move the adoption of the resolution? Resolution on item 10 has been moved and seconded. Mr. Rainey.
First, thank you, Mr. Moderator, for allowing the Technology Advisory Group to be referred this item at our October meeting. For those who are unfamiliar with the Technology Advisory Group, TAG, it's the subject of item 11. This item did originate with the Moderator's Special Committee on Governance, and I'm hoping that former member of that group will speak to its genesis. TAG began reviewing the email question almost 2 years ago. It was pretty much our first item that we started reviewing, but we never achieved consensus on the way forward. I think why will be clear as I go on. We did, however, build up a considerable body of knowledge of the issues around it and applied that to the concerns around the original item. This revised version makes 3 changes from what was presented by GovCon. Based on input from the town IT director, it provides a more generous implementation window of 180 days for returning members, unless it can be accomplished sooner. It does require new members to be onboarded within 30 days of being sworn in. Support. A member in each district will provide peer-to-peer support to reduce the burden on the town IT department for the lowest level support issues. If item 11 is approved, this could be changed to reference the new committee. Also, we put in language around FOIA and retention. What does this mean for the RTM member? First of all, this assumes the town email system. Currently, that's Outlook for Office 365. Some of us might not like it, but that's the available system. If a member wants to use a mail application as opposed to a browser, it will require granting the town the ability to manage manage and possibly wipe your device. If you use an employer-owned device or have allowed them to manage your device, this may be in conflict. You can always just use this in a browser, and that's actually what I do. Second, you will have to do the occasional cybersecurity online training session from the town. What's it cost? The email accounts themselves are a minimal expense of less than $6,000 per year total for the additional members who do not already have town-issued email ad accounts. Support and other costs, however, are more expensive at $43,000 a year. There is some more detail in the explanos on that. What are the benefits of doing this? First of all, this is a standard way of your constituents reaching you. I believe this was actually proposed by the League of Women Voters some time ago. This separates RTM business from other personal and business or other types of email accounts. The main benefit, however, is the transfer of risk from the individual RTM member to the town in a few areas. First, freedom of information. The member would not have to do searches themselves if requested. Second, records retention. Please see the letter from the town attorney in the attachments. It's not often that we get a message from the law department like that. Note that this is a huge concern if everyone is not on the town system. Delete that innocuous email that came to your personal account. Please think twice. You are liable for this. Cybersecurity. Atlanta and Baltimore suffered ransomware attacks, completely crippling them and costing millions in direct costs to mitigate the incidents. General liability limitation and reputational risk. Again, I invite a member of the governance committee to refresh us as to the genesis of this item. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Doug Wells with the Legislative and Rules Committee report.
We took this item up last Monday evening. We had Mr. Rainey speak to us on the issue, and he told us pretty much what he just told all of you, so I won't repeat any of that. We did make one change to the language. This was at the request of Town Attorney Wayne Fox, who also was there for us on this issue. In paragraph 5 of the resolution, it says all RTM emails and attachments shall be preserved in accordance with Connecticut's Freedom of Information Act and other records retention laws. Attorney Fox pointed out that it really isn't Freedom of Information Act that is in play here, and it's really the records retention laws that require us to preserve these emails. So we deleted the language Freedom of Information Act and other, and so that it reads shall be preserved in accordance with Connecticut's records retention laws. Our vote on this as amended was 10-0-0, both as to legal order and merits.
Thank you. Mr. Newman with the Town Services Committee report.
Town Services took up this item for the third time, I believe, in the last 12 months. To use a tired phrase, we feel this is a solution looking for a problem. What used to be brought before us, or some of the reasoning in the past, was it was hard to reach me, you, by email. And in actuality, it's just as easy or hard to email me if I'm using my Gmail account than it is if I'm using a Greenwich ct.gov account. Some people will tell you it's harder to use the Greenwich system. As we had a member from the Greenwich Fire Department who was before us just as a guest, and they mentioned that the GFD was giving town emails this year, and that no one uses them because of the difficulty, and that they still all use private emails and text between themselves to communicate. While we were looking at this, went on to the town website and said, let me send myself an email. I can't. Okay, so let's fix some of the other problems before we get to assigning this. We don't think $5,000–6,000 plus the $43,000 a year that technology will have to spend to keep this updated for us is really a low-cost item, since we can do it for free. This is the third time that we are going to vote, that Town Services have voted on this. We voted it down every time. This time we voted 2 in favor, 7 against, no abstentions, District 3 two people who did vote for it were on the technology committee.
All right, before we continue on this, let me announce the vote on item 6, which was the range improvement. Those in favor, 150, opposed, 17, abstaining 0. Item 6 is carried. Mr. Wells? Mr. Berg, you don't have a committee report, do you? Mr. Wells?
On behalf of the Legislative and Rules Committee, we amend the paragraph 5 by deleting the language Freedom of Information Act and other.
All right, is there any objection to that amendment? Hearing none, that may be adopted upon unanimous consent. Thank you. Discussion on item 10. I do have a speaker list. I have 3 speakers signed up. Larry Malcolm, to be followed by Mike Spilo.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. You should be aware of the security and privacy issues regarding a town email system. Many of us use the mail app on our phones or tablets to access our email quickly and easily. However, in order to get your email from the town email system in the mail app on your phone, you would first need to download a rootkit profile and control app. Even if the control app worked as intended, it gives tremendous power over your phone to the town, compromising your security and privacy. The control app has the ability to do things like see all of the apps on your device, see your phone number, shut down your camera, disable web browsing, disable cloud backups, change your passcode and lock you out of your device, find out your location, and erase your entire device, including everything on it. Even if you trust the town never to do any of those things, we all know there are enormous risks from viruses, malware, and hacking. By requiring us to place this control app on our device to use our mail app, you're opening the door to potential nefarious activities. Because this rootkit is so powerful, Apple has the following warning when you try to install it. Quote, installing this profile will allow the administrator to remotely manage your iPhone. The administrator may collect personal data, add, remove accounts and restrictions, install, manage, and list apps, and remotely erase data on your iPhone. It should be noted that the town could record all of our emails at the server level and does not need the control app at all, which makes its use all the more troubling. If the town feels that it's important for us to use a town email system, then they should figure out a way that we can easily access it on our devices without these security and privacy risks.
Here, here.
Mr. Spilo, to be followed by Alexis Volgaris.
Hi, I'm Mike Spilo from District 11. I am a longtime user of the town email system, and I can tell you it doesn't work at all. It's difficult to use, it has all of the constraints that the speaker before me mentioned, which means that it's impossible to get your emails automatically except through a web browser, as Mr. Rainey mentioned. And the web browser app has significant limitations as well. Attachments often don't work and has no ability to notify you when new emails arrive, so you have to be continuously checking it. It's a nuisance. I tried using it for about 6 months and gave up, and I'm pretty technologically savvy. And so I think that there are several different workarounds. There are workarounds for the notifications, and there are workarounds for the restrictions, and but really the point is that all of those things should be in place before this item comes before us, requiring us to use the email system. So it should be a usable, user-friendly system that allows you to send and receive attachments, that allows you to get notified when you have new emails, and it should not require draconian security measures on your phone. And once that's in place, then I would have no objections. Until then, I think we should stay with whatever workarounds we're all currently using.
Ms. Volgaris to be followed by Dan Osismeyer.
So somebody asked how this came from GovCom, and so I'll just give you the history. In January of 2018, this was an item on our agenda. It didn't pass, or on our call it didn't pass, and then we got a lot of feedback when we were in the middle of collecting our feedback. So that was front-loaded, we collected our feedback very early in the process, and so we wanted to bring it back. It was a lot of discussion at GovCom, and we batted around a lot of things. Some of the things that haven't been mentioned, and we leave it to you, the body, to decide is if you don't have a smartphone or a smartphone that's not up to date and can't accept the application, as horrifying as that application has been described, you can't access your emails. So it does have the potential, as is, to limit people and their ability to get their emails if they're on a town system mobily. And that is something to consider. The other thing that we also discussed is the workaround is what most people are using now, which is a dedicated RTM email address. Like your name at RTM@gmail, and also CCing everything to the town's archival site. And so we leave it to you to decide, but that is how we got here. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Ozesmer?
I agree with what the last four speakers said. I think it's pretty clear that, Brian was very kind about giving us full disclosure, but I really don't think that there's any kind of case to be made that this would be the right decision to vote yes on this item. So I would recommend you vote no. Thank you.
Further discussion on item 10? Yes.
Hi, Kathy Steele from District 11. I would just like to say I'm a big fan of having some kind of email system for our constituents to be able to be in touch with us easily and simply. I have concerns about all of the things that the other speakers have said tonight. I have concerns about the costs, but I want to just give you one example from District 12. This is from an email that went out to our members this week. And I will mention only the retiring members so I don't embarrass anyone. Here are the emails that are part of our district. B. Collins at Eclipse Brands, Rick at Greenwich Insurance, W.D. Fass at Yahoo, John Redmond at Gmail, B. Steinfeld at OptOnline. In our district, there are 8 different domains that are used for email. 1 Hotmail, 1 AOL, 12 Gmails, 1 Yahoo, 6 OptOnlines, and 3 personal domains. Even for the people like myself that have an RTM Gmail account, kathy.steele.rtm@gmail. Let me give you a couple other examples. Our chair, Susan Fahey, RTM@gmail. T. Friedman at RTM, Gmail. Karen G, RTM@gmail. There's just no common naming convention. And now that the technology group, I believe, I don't remember if it was their recommendation or another group, but our emails are not even online anymore for constituents to find us. So in the absence of a greenwichct.org email, what I would suggest is this body at least come up with and adopt a uniform naming standard, naming convention for emails so that someone that wants to reach us can do so easily and efficiently. Thank you.
Further discussion on item 10? Will the district chairs please mark the voting cards on item number 10 and proceed to fill your delegation? Item number 11 now comes before us. Liz Perry, member of the Technology Advisory Group.
Good evening. I know it's late. I'll be brief. My name is Liz Perry, and on behalf of the Technology Advisory Group, I'm here to present item 11. This is the item that proposes a new permanent special committee, the Technology Committee. It is as it appears in the call. As members of the current Technology Advisory Group met with the standing committees last week, some concerns about this resolution were surfaced. In light of the fact that this resolution proposes a change in the rules of the RTM and the fact that just earlier this evening we discussed the importance of second readings, it seems like a good practice to take our time and make sure that we hear fully from everyone. Therefore, on the advice of the moderator, at the appropriate time, I will offer a motion to postpone this item until January. Thank you.
I think at this point it's by operation of our rule that we can't, this is a proposal to amend our rules. We just adopted item number 2. So we'll follow that, which says we can discuss it tonight, we can hear motions to amend, we cannot dispose of it finally. And then at the end of that, the moderator is directed by the new rule, to put it on the next call. So we don't really need, that must be done. It's not like we could defeat a motion to postpone.
Okay, so you don't need me to bring that motion to
No.
postpone? Okay, thank you.
All right, may we have the reports of the committees in whatever order you prefer? Alexis Vulgaris with Health and Human Services.
Health and Human Services met last Tuesday evening to discuss this item. We invited Bob Brady, Chairman of the Technology Advisory Group, Andre Anthony, a member of TAG and an HHS member, Tom Klein, Director of IT for the Town of Greenwich, Kimberly Spezzano, Assistant Town Clerk, and Carmela Budkins, the Town Clerk. Mr. Brady offered a summary history of the various TAG efforts dating back to 1998. He explained that over the years there have been some sort of technology effort within the RTM, but due to the fact that the committee was never formalized, it was difficult to keep momentum going and/or implement significant technological changes. We spent 75 minutes discussing the merits of the proposed resolution, and over the course of our detailed and lengthy discussion, we learned a couple of things. One, that no other standing committee invited members of the IT or town clerk's department to their meetings to discuss their impressions regarding creating this permanent technology committee. Health and Human Services feels very strongly that all standing committees should have the benefit of hearing from all of the stakeholders, IT, town clerk, TAG, related to this proposed committee, and hearing what they believe are the pros, cons, questions, concerns before voting to establish a permanent special committee. Two, we also learned that there was little, if any, communication between TAG and the IT and the town clerk's department specific to this proposed resolution to establish the permanent technology committee. And what, if any, impact such a committee would have on the two departments, or how such a committee would interact with these departments. Health and Human Services believes all potential stakeholders should be aware of the proposed technological committee and have a general understanding of how the various stakeholders may interleave. Then we had more general observations. Members of Health and Human Services expressed an interest in the use of technology to support the needs of the RTM, but the committee did have some questions. For example, the District 7 delegate asked, what problem are we trying to solve with this committee, and what are the practical day-to-day issues that this committee would address?
I feel like I'm dominating the podium, I'm sorry. Public Works took up item 11, the resolution to change our rules to establish the Technical Advisory Group as an RTM committee. Mr. Bob Brady and Ms. Red Lopez from the committee assisted us. The intent in making this rule change was to formalize the existence of the Technology Advisory Group to do what the name suggests, which is to provide the RTM with access to a group that can be troubleshooters for any members who may need assistance. In addition, it would be a conduit between the RTM and both the IT and town clerk's departments. We felt that, given the increased rate at which technological changes are now happening, and probably will, no doubt, be apt to get more complex and critical in the near term, this change would be helpful to our members. Also, if RTM members have specific complaints, the members of this committee could address such complaints in a timely manner, which can improve communication to better serve the technical needs of the RTM. Our vote was 10-0-0, districts 2 and 9 absent.
Thank you. Andy Chapin with the Parks and Recreation Committee report.
We took this up at our last meeting. Jenny Baird was there from the TAG group. In summary, what was discussed was that technology is here to stay. It's growing. It's becoming a bigger part of our lives. So TAG is probably a good thing to keep in our RTM lives. They were feeling it was hard to do the job with the number of people they have because not everyone's there all the time. And while they understood that maybe a standing committee would put too hard of a standing committee of all the districts would put too hard of a burden on some of the smaller districts, it would be good to have a few more people on the TAG committee, even if they came from some of the larger districts. There was a discussion on what the focus of the committee would be, and we were told that the focus would be mostly on the RTM, not the town's IT department, but
technology as it applies to the RTM. One of the discussions was about how they may be able to help us interface with the technology and the people, perhaps put a more compassionate face on new technology, even offering some help sessions, if you will, before the Wednesday meeting, before the Monday meetings or some of the district meetings. The vote on this was 8-3-0 in favor. The 3 people that were against were primarily concerned that it might be redundant with what the town does. They didn't want it to be in conflict with what the town has. Some felt that they liked it as a moderator-appointed committee with goals given by the moderator every 2 years. So a little more focus on what they actually do. Again, we voted in favor 8-3-0.
John Eddy with the Appointments Committee report.
Thank you. So the Appointments Committee met to discuss this. We met with a very knowledgeable and helpful Jenny Baird and Ed Lopez, who described the accomplishments of TAG and the significant projects they were working on. Asked us to consider the question, is the use of technology essential to the functioning of a modern organization? And talked about the goal of the Technology Committee being supporting communicating in an efficient and secure way and leveraging technology to improve our processes. Also noted that an electronic call, rather than the paper one we have right now, or the option for a paper one we have right now, can save us $10,000 a year in mailing and printing costs. And finally, that a need for the committee reflects the necessity of consistent advocacy in order for us to make headway to meet the needs that we have in our individual committees. The general consensus of the Appointments Committee was that there was a need for this committee. However, a motion was made to change the committee to a standing committee rather than a special committee. The argument being made that with the existing special committees, if we had this year, the Appointments Committee would have 50 people to organize an interview between January 14th and February 4th. And we'd be looking at, the Appointments Committee and the Appointments Committee, new Appointments Committee chair, not me, having to write out 33 resolutions and make 33 reports at the March meeting. However, this motion failed. And we discussed various other motions to reduce the size and composition of the committee, which also failed. In the end, this was approved 6-3-1 is on the call, and the minority did not think that the Appointments Committee had the bandwidth to handle TAG as a special committee.
Lucia Jansen with the BOC report.
Good evening. We had Jenny Baird as well, along with her colleague Brian Rainey and Andrea Anthony. They expressed their concern that the current structure of TAG is set up as an advisory committee formed at the discretion of the moderator. TAG seeks to be a committee defined in the RTM rules and in perpetuity unless a future RTM rule change. Ms. Baird went through the explanatory comments. One of the first questions out of the Budget Overview Committee was, do they have a budget for their ideas and staff to implement? And there is no plan at this point to have a budget or a staff. And what was described is that with some of these ideas or innovations, that they would be a business case for it. And it became apparent through the discussion that this would probably involve department heads and their budget. And we were remiss on the BOC to invite the stakeholders from those other departments. So we did not have the town clerk's office, we did not have the IT department, and we regret that. I certainly do, because we just didn't get that perspective of any impact it would have on other department budgets. The BOC discussed the merits of a permanent technology committee versus going along as is. It was confirmed with the moderator later that, as it has been since I've been on the RTM for 14 years, the RTM at the beginning of each term asked the RTM if they want to be a part of the technology group. That would continue going forward. There is no provision that this will be sunset or it's not considered valuable to the RTM. The sense by many was to support technology group who have been working hard to bring more efficiency. However, some were skeptical of initiatives with material budget impact and no clear line of accountability. A motion was made and seconded to approve the Permanent Technology Committee with a vote of 7-1-3. District 2 was absent. District 12 voted no because he felt the current structure was fine. District 7, 9, and 11 abstained. Thank you.
Rob Pirelli-Minetti with the Finance Committee report.
We took this up after listening to the joint presentation for the many committees. We had Brian Rainey with us. Our discussion was similar to some of the other discussions. We really didn't have the perspective of the town departments. We, again, as Lucia said for the BOC, it wasn't until this came to our attention that we learned that there really hadn't been much coordination. It never really occurred to us that these people would have been operating more or less in a vacuum without working closely with the town clerk and all of these people. So we, in fact, supported it 10-1-0 with District 6 absent. The no vote was from District 8, who expressed concerns that he did not agree that forming a committee would really make the work easier. I don't think anyone disputes that our technology is in the dark ages and that we need help, but the real question is this committee the right way to do it? I voted in favor of it at our meeting, but I have to say at this point, I don't think I would support it. So, thank you.
Kimberly Blank with the Education Committee report.
We also heard this as part of the joint presentation, and then Liz Perry, a TAG member from District 7, attended our Education Committee meeting to answer additional questions. Most of our discussion was around the proposed structure of the new committee. We asked Ms. Perry why it was necessary for the group to be a permanent special committee rather than operate as a moderator's advisory group or a moderator's special committee. Ms. Perry responded that it's her understanding that the technology group would end at the end of this term and not be renewed. The former advisory group did not have the status of a special committee and couldn't vote on call items or bring items in front of the RTM. Leaving it as a moderator's advisory group or special committee would put its existence at the discretion of the moderator. The group believes that technology has been a perennial issue for the RTM for over 25 years, and there are plenty of issues for a permanent special committee to address. Some felt that this group should review technology portions of the operating and capital budgets, although this is not specifically written into the new committee's purview. We spent some time discussing whether, if this item failed to pass, whether the committee should vote on a SOMR advising the moderator to create a special technology committee. There was some support for this idea, but it was ultimately moot since the committee voted in favor of this item 7-0. District 7, me, and 11 voted no. Both no votes expressed an interest in having a committee that continues to work on technology issues for the RTM, but felt that a rule change was premature. They felt that the technology group's work should continue as a moderator's special committee. They were concerned that we were good at adding committees to the RTM, but not at taking them away, and that there may not be as substantial a need after 4 to 5 years of a committee's work. They were also concerned that it would be cumbersome to have 13 members be vetted by appointments and put in front of the RTM every 2 years. They also pointed out that there are no specific items or budgets to be referred to the group, as would be common with a permanent committee. Thanks.
Thank you. Richard Newman with the Town Services Committee report.
Town Services took this item up. We do oversee the budget and oversight of technology now. The special committee did reach out to us to see what we thought about them being a permanent committee. This was early on. They came back to us after listening to our suggestions that a special committee would probably be more useful to us, to be used when needed by the RTM. The way I think they look at themselves is they'll work on RTM technology projects, including the RTM on the town website, electronic voting if that technology side. So to have technologically savvy people looking at it, we thought that could be a help. Now, we did not speak with either Tom Klein from Technology or the town clerk's office, and obviously there will be an interaction between those departments. We did vote, though, 8-0-1 with absent, 3, 4, and 10 absent. And it was presented to us by Liz Perry and Brian Rainey, who are both members of the Town Services Committee.
Doug Wells with the Legislative and Rules Committee report.
We took up this item last Monday evening. I think all the arguments pro and con for this have already been discussed. What our committee did was make a language change, and it was at the suggestion of the fellow who's over there, Mr. Byrne, who was the alternate at our committee for District 6. He suggested in the third line, or actually the beginning of the second line, where it reads under election of officers, it reads, alternates shall not be eligible to serve as officers. The suggestion was that we delete officers and plug in a chair or vice chair. What this does is allows an alternate to be elected as secretary, which is often a hard job to fill. And it's also in line with our standing committees, having the ability of an alternate to serve as secretary. So with that change, we voted 10-0-0 on the motion to change the language and 10-0-0 on the merits. And I'll make that change when you suggest.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, so the change is to delete the word in the sentence line, in the second sentence, beginning alternates shall not be eligible to serve as alternates, delete alternates, insert in its place chair or vice chair.
All right, that being offered on behalf of the committee, it doesn't require a second. Is there any objection to changing that to allow alternates to serve as secretary? Hearing none, that may be adopted upon unanimous consent. Peter Berg?
Land Use took this up and voted in favor of the item as it appears on the call, 12-0-0.
And Susan Fahey, Chair of District 11.
I'm not sure we have a quorum left, but I will be quick as I can. So District 11 took up the entire call, including item 11, which we had our usual lively and rich conversation. Many or most of the members were giving large kudos to the Technology Advisory Group for the work they have done to date. And they hope that this group does continue in some form. The concerns that were raised in our group, which we originally made a motion to postpone, but I think Tom just wanted to make sure we shared our views so they can be incorporated, were obviously the same precedent-setting conditions that would allow permanent committees that were raised earlier. Among other things discussed were there just seems to be a cohesiveness about what they actually were going to be having under their purview. Bob had mentioned Brady, something that he thought was either to be there to train people or for people to complain, which is a nice thought, but we'd heard other things from the other people on the committee. There was obviously the same concern that the technology committee needs to be a permanent committee when it has no budget oversight or nothing referred to it. Liz Perry had shared that she was not looking for TAG to have budget oversight herself, but it was the desire of several members. So I think that needed to be ironed out. She had also thought at the time that the moderator was not going to renew this committee, which he has then said that whoever's elected it would renew. Our town service department, which you just heard from, had questions about oversight as well, including the budget level. I thought one of the bigger concerns that was raised was our appointments committee rep in our district felt it could be hard to staff, especially at the new start of a term with 11 for claims committee, now the newly expanded labor contracts committee with 9, and this with 13, putting those resolutions alone at over 35. Obviously, a concern was, we've heard about the stakeholders on both sides being at the meetings, which at the joint meeting they were not. And someone raised, obviously, it might be prudent to wait till after the moderator election and see what kind of, what he would do with the technology advisory group as it continues on. The last comment was just the whole second read, which we proved tonight about fracking plastic bags took 1, 2, or 3 times to come before us. So we made a motion to postpone in hopes that the moderator, who was elected, will have the opportunity to re-up this committee as an advisory group, and also then have the group itself be able to talk with all the stakeholders and the RTM about what this committee should look like and what its purview is. And thank you. We voted 19-0-0 to come up and postpone. Thank you.
All right, discussion on item 11. Mr. Rogers? District 5.
District 5 took this item up at our meeting last Thursday, and we voted unanimously. I think there were 13 of us there, 13-0-0, to support this item.
Further discussion on item 11? All right, so there is no question at this point. I'll just remind you what the rule that we just adopted. That was item 2, says proposed resolution at the first reading shall be presented at the initial meeting, and committee reports given. Discussion will be appropriate. Motions to amend may be voted upon. And then the next provision says the moderator will then place the item on the call of the next regularly scheduled RTM. So that will be done. I do have the result of the vote on item 10. That was the email requirement. Those in favor, 19. Opposed, 134. Abstaining, 2. Item 10 has failed. And I think the record ought to reflect that staying with us to the very bitter end were the 3 new members of the Board of Selectmen and Howard Richmond, our tax collector. All right. Thank you. Thank you all for coming. I wish you all Happy Hanukkah, Merry Christmas, and a Happy New Year.